I mean, you've got to add it in if it's going to, because you're going to take it to vote in June.
Are we a go?
Either that or don't add it in, have them suck it up in the budget he's got.
Good evening.
You know what I mean?
Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Rockport Special Town Meeting this Monday, March 25th at 6 p.m. at the Rockport Public Library to vote on the following articles. Article 1 calls to elect a moderator. Do I have a nomination?
I move Jeff Parker be the moderator.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, nominations are closed. Any discussion on the nomination? And a vote for Jeff?
All four.
Perfect. Thank you. Jeff Parker is moderator for tonight's special town meeting. I will now turn the meeting over to Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. We are here to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to purchase a parcel located on town tax map 16, lot 65, for $28,500 for the purpose of constructing and repairing the access point to Robinson Drive. Do we have a do we nominate? Do we make a motion?
Make a motion.
Do we have somebody to make a motion on the select board?
I move that the town authorize the select board to purchase a parcel located on town tax map 16, lot 65 for $28,500 for the purpose of constructing and repairing the access point to Robinson Drive.
So important, we heard it twice. Discussion on the matter.
You second.
Second.
I second.
Oh, second, so thank you very much. Okay, moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion on the matter?
And I
Seeing no,
understand this is all paid for by FEMA, so this isn't any money the town will be spending.
excellent. And everybody, all the Rockport residents in the room are allowed to vote on this, this being a public meeting. So we'll close the conversational part of it and vote in the yay. Everybody in favor of the motion. Apparently Mark has 2 votes.
I missed the first one.
Anyone against? And anyone abstaining? Okay, you got the number on that.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you, and this closes out the special town meeting portion of this evening.
That's correct. Thank you, Jeff.
Can I go back to work?
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks all our, the public. All right, let's call to order the budget review meeting for Monday, March 25th, 6:05 PM. Looks like we're starting with buildings and grounds. We have Glenn coming up, that's page 293.
Okay. Jeff, do I need to move my mic or am I okay? My mic's okay? All right. Good evening, night number 3, exciting. We're almost on the home stretch. This budget obviously is probably the area of the biggest growth, probably in the last 2 years. And it's largely from the change of focus from, in part of our public works, sort of doing everything under the sun, including the work of the sun in some cases, and instead splitting that into its own department to handle really the buildings and grounds. And we've been able, as a town, through the good work that Glenn and Matt, our employees in buildings and grounds, and Glenn, our first our first supervisor in that department, to oversee the work that is allowing us to get projects completed without requiring us to go out and bring in contractors working on their timetable, working on their need, rightfully so, to have a bottom line and be able to pay their way. And the labor that we've been able to accomplish, whether it's roofing, whether it's extreme makeover of the harbor bathrooms, stair treads at the Opera House, Jeff's space where he was working out of in the Parker room before that got underwater. Those are just a handful of the projects that Buildings and Grounds has taken on. And they've also, I guess indirectly, ended up having to take on some of the mowing as well over the last few years, which was probably a bit of a surprise, but, you know, the town bought mowers, but I think the extent of it was a little bit more than anticipated. The other thing that we've done since we created this project, it's this budget, and you'll see it certainly here, is you look at, under the supplies column. So last year was really the first year that Buildings and Grounds was sort of working on it, you know, on its budget and sort of figuring out how to take these various maintenance budgets in each department and each of the buildings we had, and then work within them. So it was difficult before because each department had their own, you know, or those who ran each building had their own sort of maintenance projects, and Glenn had to sort of beg, borrow, and steal to try to get the money to complete a project. So this year was the first year we've had that all in one area and under Glenn's ability to make those decisions. And I think if you asked department heads and we took a vote, we haven't, but if we did, overwhelmingly, it's been a really positive thing. Instead of every department head having to have some responsibilities that, you know, maybe they're not necessarily someone who was looking after buildings. They're responsible for this department or that department. And so the ability to say, Glenn, I got a problem with this, can you fix it? You know, we had the light, there's a little closet, for those of you who go behind, see what you have, but those out there in TV land haven't. When you go behind the counter, the clerk's desk, there was this closet that pretty much had been used for flags for the cemeteries and not a whole lot else. And when Liz came on board and said, you know, hey, we should start to take on, you know, doing license plates and offering license plates for our residents. They don't have to go to Rockland anymore to get a plate. They can get one at the town office now. I think within 2 weeks, I want to say within 2 weeks, Glenn had that room framed up, ready to go, and the plates showed up before we even knew it, and we were ready to have license plates a month before we'd actually thought we could be possible, because Glenn was able to sort of make it happen. So there's policy, and then there's actually the real world of getting things done. And Glenn, I don't want to sing his praises too much here, but he gets an extra Kit Kat for this, maybe over there. But you know, Glenn has done a great job of trying to marry the things. A lot of us who work in town government are real good at creating policy, but we can't build a bookshelf to save our life. And if we did, you don't want that. And so the ability to meet those two things together, Glenn's done such a great job in doing that. So this budget largely is the reflection of living 6 months of Glenn having the ability to manage his own, you know, supplies and maintenance budgets in each of those buildings. Again, we were able, some of you may remember last year, the Harbor Masters building the bathroom there was a big topic of conversation. Abby had put some money in, I'd cut it out, and the budget committee told me that was a terrible idea, and it told all of us that was a terrible idea. So some money went back into that budget, and, you know, again, sort of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, Matt and Glenn were able to get that project done. It looks phenomenal. I mean, it will really sort of wow people, assuming the whole building doesn't wash away with the next storm, but it looks really phenomenal in what they've done over there. So the washer and dryer was another big topic of conversation. They had that. The window in that space where the washer and dryer was rotted and needed to be replaced. Glenn's gone in and they've replaced that window. So these are I mean, we've talked a lot about infrastructure and how do we get ahead of things like this. Having, you know, this type of budget and being ahead of those projects before they become an issue where a rotten window turns into a whole side needs to be replaced, and then you got to, you know, it could go out of control. So I can't say enough about what we've done here. The other thing we've done is we've aligned where our two employees are, where Glenn and Matt are in terms of where they fit in terms of the public works budget. So, for example, we have some supervisor positions in the public works budget. We also have, and that was part of the budget, the project, but there's some symmetry between those two departments in terms of how they work. And so last year, when we did the salary survey, we were looking at them more as maintenance people and janitors as opposed to the skilled tradespeople that we are. They're doing roofing and woodworking and, you're gonna build us a dais. That's not the scope that we were looking for the salary survey. And so there's adjustment in here to sort of right-size that with their peers in public works, just in terms of saying the skill level is appropriate from one employee to the next, and supervisory one level to the next.
When
So,
we talk about salary, are we just talking about wages, or are we talking about
Wages.
entire compensation package?
no, just wages, just talking wages.
But
Yep.
then the benefits are a function of the wages. I mean, the benefits follow the wages.
FICA, Social Security, but not in terms of health insurance or, those, the most costly ones are, the ones that are fixed.
That
based
stay
on
the same
employee.
regardless of your
Sure,
salary.
but like when we talk about like comparing them to other positions,
Yep,
and I would assume that the supervisor role here has a vehicle included,
yeah.
how's that compared to other across the board? And like, that has to be considered too.
Yeah, basically, there isn't a change in terms of this budget. It's the same vehicle, the van that they've been using, for the last year or so. And that's not an addition. Nothing's changing in terms of the vehicle side of things. It's really strictly salary.
Okay.
Glenn, is there any other major projects that we should mention, just in terms of what we've talked about in here? In terms of,
We got all kinds of things we'd like to do, it depends on the budget, of course, but, I mean, for instance, what's going on at the town office right now? If I didn't have to have Matt cleaning and things like that, so we could schedule a regular work week, we could have done that kind of job for you as well, but we've got a few other projects, some updates that need to happen down at the harbor. The windows are leaking and trim painting and just regular building maintenance that's been slipped by for a few years in several of the places, not just down there. But, as far as big projects go, we kind of limit it because we have the daily stuff that comes in as well, that you don't want something all ripped apart when we have small projects coming in as well. But there's just two of us, so I try to remember to schedule that for two guys, and Matt does a lot of work. I can set him off on his own, and he does a really good job at just getting stuff done.
The other thing I want to add is there were some snow removal activities that you guys took on this year.
Oh, yeah.
The town buildings, there's not a ton of that, but around the town office. That had previously been part of a contract. We'd had the larger contract we have for sidewalk maintenance in the winter. We've stripped out some of the town buildings part of that. This building was a little bit of an outlier because there's so much and it's such a challenge with the roofs and the ice coming down. But we tried to strip out that and make that more a part of our building maintenance, aspect. And then, there's obviously the mowing, that's a big part of, what we've been doing. It's, the other thing, and I think I mentioned this in the initial night, but I should say so. So there's a portion of the project at the town office that was, basically to create a break room. So it's, there's an office that, actually Megan's using right now. Cost that we had gotten from a contractor was over $100,000 to do that. Just to, sort of set that up and put some shelving in and turn the sink around from one side of the wall to the other. Not like, you don't want me doing it, but not exactly like, you need the, really go crazy on that. You certainly wouldn't think it's a six-figure job. Glenn and Matt are gonna take that on. It allowed us to cut down our project cost substantially, so we can get that project done. We can have a space that people can go into and eat lunch. Right now, they're eating in that little conference room outside my office, and, when I'm ranting and raving on the phone, that doesn't happen. But, there's certainly, it's difficult when they don't wanna hear me. They wanna get away from me to eat their lunch. So, That's gonna be an added piece, but again, it's that sort of value added that we have by having these skilled people working for us. You know, that's $100,000 that, yes, will have value in materials and the time that Glenn and Matt are here, but, that's $100,000 we're saving. So, we've got a great thing here and, wanna keep that going and get our buildings up, you know, and fix our problems.
Plus, we have the ability to jump in when you guys need something done, and we can work around what's going on in all the different buildings if we have to, you know, where, if you were scheduling a contractor, they're gonna set a block and have to show up, where we can move around a bit.
So, under 5150, excuse me, when's the last time the building's been stained or painted?
I don't know that answer. I don't know. Any idea?
That's why I asked, because
Yeah.
it should be done. I don't think it's been done
Yeah.
in the 30 years or so that I can remember it being. I think that's original paint that it's got on it.
Would be.
So my point is, if
Yeah.
you're talking about, is that enough
If
money?
you're doing windows, do you
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about
And that
siding
way you
too?
can then
Yeah.
go away from the building saying, that one's done,
Done.
let's shift to another one.
Yeah.
But if it's not there to do it,
Mm-hmm.
is it in some other place?
No, there's nothing in here about staining now.
It's just the windows.
Yeah.
I mean, it ought to be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm as snug as the rest of them, but
Yes.
which part? Which part were you agreeing to? No, but I mean, listen, you know, that's like pointing and sealing the bricks of the town office or the fire station.
Yep.
Let's do the building, do it right, add 15 grand or whatever you gotta do to it, or find it somewhere,
Yeah.
and see if you can make it a complete package to be
Yeah.
done.
And you'll see the town 5165, we have money in there for the sealing of the bricks as well, so that one, I know, and that's one you'd mentioned for a few years now, I thought,
Yeah, no, I
okay,
mean, it's just-
here we go.
But, you know, it's
We
just,
gotta get it done.
it's, I mean, Charlie Knight, God bless him, has had, you know, did a lot of work at the fire station, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done that's
Yep.
been overlooked.
Yeah.
But is that something that you might look into and,
So adding stain at the harbor master's office, we're talking.
yeah, no, I mean, you did the roof, what,
2 years ago?
a couple of years ago?
Yeah. I think it was
So
2
look
years.
at the condition of the shingles and whether it's time to stain that or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I don't remember them having been done in my time, but,
I think it still looks nice because it's a semi-solid stain, which kind of wears away slowly,
Yeah.
so you don't notice it, but
yeah, I mean, it's
I'm
Do
been
you want
sure
to
it
add
needs to be
anything?
done.
It's been there since 92,
92-ish.
it's been 30.
The harbor master's here. to
Yeah,
answer.
Abby's thinking she,
When we did the roof, we also got them quotes on doing.
You don't, yeah, sorry.
We did it, Mark.
Sorry.
When we did the roof, we also got some quotes for staining and looking and maybe painting if staining wasn't the option. And we had two different folks come and look, and both said you can kind of leave it to weather as it will, and it's not going to deter. It just has that sort of patina look, but it won't actually deter from the longevity of those cedar. Yeah, because you could because just replacing them would probably be the same amount of length in the. So, Mark had mentioned a couple years ago.
Well,
we
yeah, I
looked
guess
into it.
I'm just curious as if we do stain it, how much will that help preserve it for even further down the road before they need to be replaced?
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is just trying to find a way to make it last.
Yep. And that it was told to me, because I had the same thought, that it wouldn't really add anything because it was sort of meant to wear.
Yeah,
But
cedar is good on
What-
its own.
What did, you said they mentioned the price, or did you?
no, they didn't.
Okay.
because they were saying you're not going to gain anything by doing it, is
Right.
what I'm
Right.
understanding.
If you don't mind the way it looks, you're not gaining any. You're gonna. It's all cosmetic essentially.
Trim is a
rather
different
than
story,
trim
though.
would be different.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I got that written down to try to do the trim.
It was
The trim and the
32
windows
years, I
would-
don't know.
Paint the trim.
It's up to
Yeah.
you guys. 92,
Yeah,
Don't
trim and
know.
windows would be what we would.
Yeah, that
they
makes
didn't
sense.
build it far enough to
big.
back to the
You
bank.
know,
Actually, the windows that are in there, Mark, are from 2002, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I
hair
know there've been
blows
some,
and stuff.
that went from the regular to the Thermapanes. Yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
that's all I had.
Well, I think I think this has been a very smart idea to break this group out and save us some money in being able to maintain our buildings and have that flexibility and, you know, recognizing talent when they come to us and we're able to put them to their highest and best use. So, thanks, Glenn.
In the mowing, in the mowing contract, and it's just out of curiosity, what is that? Because it's in buildings grounds, not a specific building. Is that mowing contract for particular areas?
I'm not sure where you're looking.
3630.
3630 mowing.
It's the garden contracts for the public safety building, the town office, West Rockport Fire Station. It also includes, weed whacking. What do they do to that path at the harbor? We
Yeah, the
contract
harbor path.
out
Clean it out.
the harbor path for them to,
They clean out all debris and put in new bark mulch and flowers and that kind of thing for that part, right?
It's
Do you
been,
have an idea of what total fund money is? I've seen this line item in like 3 different departments' budgets.
right.
Yeah.
Do we have an idea of what the overall cost of mowing and trimming
Yeah,
is?
it's in the.
And I would say part of it, well,
Megan's looking it up on that question.
to give you the other answer though, this has been something that's been played with, 3630. Everyone's tried to sort of reshape this and figure it out and solve the problem because it just, the number keeps going up and up
Sure.
and up and up and, you know, well, we'll break it out, we'll do these things, we won't do these things, we'll put these things together because these will be easier, but these will be more expensive. And all I see is it costs more and you want a reliable contractor who you can call and be there. And I think the other thing that happened before I got around here, but right before I got here, they had a huge issue with that last contract, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, where it was, they no-showed like the last 6 weeks, or last 2 months, really. And reliability and of course, you know, everything going out. And I think that it's been, I think that's part of the reason why it's so inconsistent, in part, in terms of like which department it's in, because everyone's tried to move it around and
Sure.
play with it. The other thing is there's a varying degree of, and we were talking about this a bit, you have one contract for this building, which includes mowing and the gardens and the weeding and the irrigation and the blah, blah, blah. Then you've got RES, which is straight ahead and mow for 4 hours, you know? And then you've got the ball fields where there's a little bit of garden, but it's a lot of mowing, but we're using those electric mowers. And then so there's just, they're all over the place. And then cemeteries, which are not fun. So I think that's part of why it's so difficult to get sense of, but the hard part is this, which is the number that you're gonna hear of the total.
$219,500. But in 2022, fiscal year ending 2022, we spent $202,000. So by removing RES, the town office building, the public safety building, we saved $40,000 the first year, $30,000 the following year. But we're expecting those costs increase with our new contract. I mean, labor rates have gone up a lot, gas has gone up a lot since we renegotiated those last contracts. So,
And by having Glenn and Matt on the mower, they're not doing other things that would cost us much more if we had brought another contractor in to
Oh,
do.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that trim painting, if we were having Glenn and Matt trim painting over at the Harbor Masters building, that cost would be way more than having, you know, Glenn on the mower. Admittedly, we all would wanna spend some time on a mower, you know, when things are getting hot, but, that's you know, I sort of wanna move away from that idea. I mean, there's still things with our town buildings, we're gonna need those mowers. It makes more sense, it's bite-sized, but when you have half of a workday, you know, half of your 40-hour work week is one day that is spent just mowing at RES. I feel like that we can get a better use out of
That's
letting
two of
that
us,
fund.
too.
And two of you
So
doing
it's
it,
a
right.
full
It's 8
day.
hours of staff.
What do you
And,
mow
and we
with?
don't even do much weed whacking over there. We don't get off the mowers
What do
much.
you mow with?
So we have two mowers, a Walker, and was it Husqvarna?
Husqvarna is
Yeah,
zero turn.
zero turn mowers. They bought them 3-4 years ago or so. And, yeah, they
Okay.
straight ahead.
The reason I ask is when the school was there, Russell mowed it with a tractor type.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have a bigger machine that mows in the street department that we could mow it with? Well,
You
that's
couldn't
too
do that
bad.
land, you couldn't do that land for, well, as wet as it's been the past couple of years.
Yeah.
You get stuck on a lawnmower if you go in the wrong place, the wrong speed, so a bigger tractor would probably be mired out there.
Oh, Just curious.
And the other thing is, if things move as they're intended to with the park, this is the last summer we would be mowing
Yep.
that because it'd be under construction next year. So hopefully, I mean, hopefully it's a little noisy next, next summer, but 1 year and done. you
Well,
know?
I've been with Lucas Tree Service
Oh,
all winter long,
there you
so
go.
I'm
Yeah.
good.
You know, yeah,
I
you
know
know.
what it's gonna sound like.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got to, I've kind of lost track.
That's what we're here
How
for.
much of the overall town mowing activity is done by contracts or by the in-house people?
We do the RES site as of right now and the town office.
Okay.
That's what we mow, and then Jason and his guys mow the fire departments.
That's who?
Fire
Oh,
service.
the actual.
Fire chief,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So they're doing their own.
Yep.
They do that side. I was
Okay.
gonna try to convince them to do the town office too.
I think just take that little puppy right across the street.
The bulk of our mowing cost honestly is at the cemeteries,
Yeah.
and that's not something we'd ever be able to staff ourselves. And that's where the bulk of the money goes, is for mowing
Yeah.
those.
No one wants to mow cemeteries.
As a curiosity, are there multiple companies that are doing some of the mowing, or is it one?
One
that's doing
contractor.
the selected things? Okay.
Yeah, and so we break up, so there's 3 different contracts right now. I think previously there were 8. Almost every cemetery had its own bid. That is, the idea that was that you could have more contractors potentially bid on them, because if you broke out Indian and Rockville, let's say, or just Seaview, maybe one contract, well, I could take on that cemetery, but that didn't happen. And, there are other areas, so for example, the town office, there's sort of a town facilities bid, which has some of those places that we talked about as an option. So the bid's out right now, it due April 4th. So I'll have real numbers on April 4th. But there's options within there to include, to get a price on would it make more sense to hire somebody to do some of those spaces that we aren't currently mowing through a contract. So RES, the harbor, other, all those places. Yeah,
Done by,
we're gonna get a price. See what it,
okay, but it's currently been done by town
staff.
staff?
Right, so so down at the harbor, it's over the last 2 years, it's been a bit of a combination of buildings and grounds and then harbor staff. Probably more, there was more, especially in the middle of the season, harbor staff did more. It's hard to mow the harbor in large part, from my perspective, that, and we'll talk a little bit about the harbor, but the ramp up to the season is so significant for staff. So our park attendants are still in school.
Oh, yeah,
We've
yeah,
got all that
yeah.
stuff. So it's really hard to get ahead of it, and it's also when the grass is growing the fastest.
And I'm not concerned of the details now, I'm just trying to get an overall grasp of, there's contracts.
It's hard.
One company's doing whatever contract stuff,
Yeah.
and then you guys, and then the fire department's doing stuff, and then
They tried.
I have a better
They
grasp.
tried to at one time divvy it up into 3 different packages, and there just wasn't anybody bidding. And a lot of the places that have the capability to do projects don't have the manpower
yeah.
needed.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
they've got
know.
everything they need except the people to do it.
I know a residential thing that I helped take care of, and last year the budget went for mowing, just because all the costs shot up.
Yeah, one
crazy.
thing you don't really think of when the mowing part of it is, when we're done mowing, we gotta clean the mowers, get them all ready, sharpen the blades, buy new blades, put, change the oil, put fuel in them. And that's 2 or 3 hours a week probably, time we get done pressure washing stuff, plus the mowing, which is taken away from what we really wanna build.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, when you got a contract, you call them and they just do it, so you don't see all the behind the scenes stuff.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Glenn, Buildings and Grounds?
On the vehicle lease, that's for a truck, is that what we're,
Yeah, van.
No, that's the van.
Van.
okay. So what was the maintenance for?
We got one of the old police cruisers
Okay, so you use a van and a police cruiser, so you each have a
Yeah.
car?
Yeah.
You have a vehicle.
right.
Yeah.
What are we shooting for, what do we wanna call that, replacement schedule for the van? Use it till it,
We'll use it up, that's what I'm figuring, but
Is it
we've
5
had
years?
it,
10?
the lease part was 5 years, wasn't it? We've had it for almost a year, and I think there's about 5,000 miles on it, so. So far, it's been really good. We've got tools and ready to go, do anything we need to do.
okay?
Anything else? Okay, thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Next is assessing. We've got Carrie here, page 147.
Hi.
Hi.
Not a lot of change here, but a couple notable changes. This is, we have made a change here to no longer extend a contract with the town of Camden for the deputy assessor position. So that's why you have a reduction in 3060. And basically what we're doing is shifting those responsibilities and some salary, honestly, into our assessing clerk. And Rebecca has attained her level 1 of CMA status, which she passed with flying colors this fall. It's not a requirement of her position, but, and Carrie can talk about this a little bit further, Carrie works pretty hard to try to provide pathways for those who work with him, under him, our organizational chart, but I think working with him is probably the better way to talk about how they really work. And Rebecca came to us last spring, I think, right after the budget process was wrapping up. And we hired a dynamite rock star, it's actually 2 of them, another one in finance as well. And she took to this like water and passed, like I said, passed the CMA in no time flat. And really has been a really important piece of our office. And I would also add, we had a very challenging summer with having some work on the valuation that we needed to do. It was
For the
not easy.
second year in a row.
Second year in a row, and pushed, I think, many people in our town to a point of real concern and frustration and questioning, and rightly so, and that's not to speak badly of the product we got, but why, my house is worth that now? That's a very good question, and we need to somewhat substantiate that and talk about that, and you need to have patient people on the phone to do it. And so the ability of having someone 40 hours a week who, worked with all those folks, talked to them. You know, the year prior, we had that same effort. You know, we had a person in that position who was split between two different departments, and this was, it was difficult for the town. But in terms of the office, it was somewhat, I know your meetings were, you know, sometimes contentious, but in terms of the office, it was placid. Because Rebecca handled it herself in such a professional way. Doesn't mean everyone got the answer that they wanted. Lord knows that doesn't happen. But we found someone who really did what, when we set out to talk about splitting that position in two, to be that person someone could, any resident could call on the phone, get a good answer that they could understand and appreciate. And if, when it's escalated, and it often, it sometimes is, especially with some of the issues we're dealing with, Kerry handles it when he's in the office, or more immediately if need be. And so that's exactly what we have now. I'm good. I'm just looking at Jeff to make sure my direction is good.
Maybe Jeff's gonna make it.
And maybe Jeff has a comment, yeah.
No, I'm just taking a break from the headphones.
Oh, okay, good. But I think it's gone very, very well, and, you know, sort of in my seat, I've been very happy with the results. But, so that, it's a change in terms of having one less person in the office, not having the deputy, which was a 1 day a week position that we were contracting with Camden. But I think we're going to be, while the person will still be able to call and get help when needed, because that's how neighbors should work. I think, you know, Caitlin will have plenty of things to do in the town of Camden in the years to come, but this is the best result for Rockport's assessing office, and I think this is a good budget, and I'm very happy with the sort of setup and the hard work that Carrie and Rebecca and Caitlin have put in to be able to get us to this place. So that's my sense. Carrie's anything you want to add to that?
There is something I want to add to that.
Okay.
Rebecca came to us from the insurance world. The parallels between insurance and assessing have blown me away almost on a daily basis. Rebecca will say something or understand something so quick, and I'll question her and ask her about it. She said, oh yeah, well, insurance, we did it this way or that. And so that's, you know, something I put in my little tickler file if I ever have to hire an assistant again or look for somebody from the insurance industry.
Yeah.
It's amazing the parallels there. Yeah.
I was asked, John, you mentioned specifically that line, was it 30, 60?
Yeah.
Is what you were talking about because of the difference in the 115,000 that the department manager was asking and what you are?
Yeah.
So you guys, it's not like a shocking
No,
surprise, it's because of that?
That's
Taking
right.
out Caitlin.
Okay.
So we
okay.
took Carrie's budget
Okay.
and then we discussed, and, you know, I think what Camden's needs are, what they are, and,
But that is the item, right?
and I think we're in agreement in terms of the number that
Okay,
is what we both stand behind, I
that's all I
think.
need to know.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
for my questions.
I think it's great that she passed her test, and I'm great that we have somebody in the office. I just want to understand the numbers.
Sure.
The $74,090, that's an increase of what we were paying her for
That's
this
right.
position.
Yep,
And she's going to be working, but yet we only saved $24,000 by doing away with
that's right,
that.
that's right.
We saved, let's see,
We-
we're
we-
spending 12,000 plus another 6 in benefits, so it's 18,000 overall for Rebecca.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna save
24.
24,000,
Right.
so we're net 6.
Net 6, right.
What's the 18?
Plus, we have really something that makes more sense.
But the 74,000 you said was Rebecca.
74,000, right, so the increase of 12.
Is for the raise
12
she
plus
gets.
6 in the benefits, that was the 18.
Rebecca last year was 62.
Right, that's exactly right.
Thank you, I was trying to find the 12.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, it went from
Right.
62 to 74.
Okay.
And then
Got
the
it.
benefits
That's
went
right.
up 6.
Okay. See, it was all a math thing.
It's all math
It's all
things,
a
there you go.
math thing.
Like everything in assessing, it's all math.
It's all about the math.
Question on line item, 3015. computer software licenses, I noticed that there's a 70% increase this year. Is the line item below it, I noticed that is decreasing, is that rolling up into that licensing too, or no?
Let's see, when you said the line below it.
The professional services,
So.
that one?
Web hosting, you mean, right?
2015 for computer software licenses has gone up 70% over last year. But 2026 is gone down budgeted. I don't know why.
So
Right.
GIS is now in 3015 along with the
Okay.
mobile assessor software
That makes
that
sense.
he
'Cause
uses.
I was also wondering like, why 3015 went up 300% since 2020. But if other things are rolled into that, then that makes sense.
The mobile assessor is a new program that they're using.
Okay.
And then annual increases in our GIS plus additional licenses.
Sure.
Then we have two mobile assessors, 1750 and 7861.
This,
Originally, the plan was to share one iPad between the two towns. We're getting a break on mobile assessor because I bought them at the same time for both towns. And my thinking then was, since I was doing most of the inspections, we just need one iPad. But in the short time that we've had it, that's turned out to not be a good idea. Because I can't be in two places, and Caitlin can, if I'm in Rockport, Caitlin can go out and do inspections, but she can't because she doesn't have an iPad. So we're buying a second iPad.
Or in this case, Rebecca, not Caitlin.
I'm sorry, no, well,
Are we buying an iPad for Caitlin when we just said we're,
what we're doing is we're buying an iPad. We have been splitting the cost for everything 50-50 between the two towns. So we're buying this next license, we can use it in either town. So we're paying 50% of that, and Camden's paying 50% of that.
okay.
And if we ever stopped cooperating on this together, each town would have their own iPad.
Speaking of which, it hasn't come up, and it's not particularly with regard to your computers, but are we continuing to put money into reserves to purchase? Because there's been no mention.
it's in the town office budget.
It's in the town office budget. Okay.
There, we replace our computer equipment, depending on what it is, every 5 years. We replace the server every 10 years. There's an annual reserve deposit, and that
Yeah.
pays, some years we spent, I think this year we're spending like 22,000 in computers. It's 100% offset by use of that reserve.
And just as a segue onto that, do you happen to know what's left in it after that, without looking it up, roughly?
This is a big purchase year, so probably 17, 18,000
And we're still putting money in?
every year, the
Alright.
same amount, yeah.
Perfect, yeah, that's nothing to do with that. I just want to make sure everybody's getting something in the future.
I yield my time happily.
The new assessing that we're gonna have done
Yeah.
for next year, what, is that, what's the company that's doing that?
KRT.
KRT, is KRT, that's not, is that in here? Am I
It's
crazy?
the property revow, 7405.
56,
Okay,
250?
yes, yes, yeah, all right. So last year, what were we paying? What is that money that we put in last year for? Because that wasn't going to KRT,
It's
right?
to go to the revow. So instead of paying for it all at once, we broke it out over a few years so that it wouldn't have a huge budget impact in 1 year.
Okay.
I guess what you're saying is, where did that 13,696 go to?
That was for the statistical update that KRT helped us with this spring.
The idea basically that we couldn't wait until those numbers were released in 2 years from then to the point where, oh, then we're made whole, but in the meantime, we would be suffering, and in fact, we would lose state revenues, and it would have
And the
created
homestead exemption.
yeah, would create a real crunch for us, for the whole town, the residents.
We would have
rest-
certified well under 100%.
Yeah.
I know last time when we talked about, well, 2 years ago, I guess, when you first talked about it, you said you were gonna bring us up to the 93 or 94%.
Right,
Because you didn't want to put us up against the wall and then have the bubble burst.
right.
Where are we and where do you hope to be?
Right now, we're about 88% right now,
So we're still under.
yeah. Not dramatically. I mean, last year at this time, we were at 68%.
Is there any significant grouping of numbers or brackets of numbers, like 400,000 under, 4 to a million? Where are you finding the biggest discrepancies?
Well, sales have slowed down a lot, so when I used to be, when, the last few times we spoke about this, I had so many sales I could break it out that way, but now sales have slowed. The prices haven't come down, but sales have slowed, so I don't have as many individual groupings where I can do that with. So, a long way of saying I don't know.
So the 88% is not causing us any trouble in terms of
No,
impacts
'cause
on our
I actually,
revenue?
I'm expecting us to be able to certify at 100% this year.
Okay, good.
Because, again, the state is 2 years behind us. So I think, I crunched the numbers a couple of days ago, and I'm expecting the ratio to come in somewhere in the 90s, which means we can certify at 100.
Great.
And that's from numbers from last year's evaluation, or are you talking about this
Well,
coming year?
the current numbers are 88%, but the state won't use the current numbers. They'll go back, they lag us by 2 years. So it's a strange game.
The other part that may benefit people that haven't heard it before is the benefit of being closer to 100% with reimbursements from the state.
So, yeah, if we're at 100%, and to be at and the ratio we're talking about is assessed value divided by sale price. So that creates the ratio. And we have to overall, on average, have to be somewhere at 91% or above, because the state allows us to add 10% to our actual ratio to certify at. So 91 plus 9 is 100, so that's why 91 is the lowest we can be, because we add the 10%, we get to 100. And so anytime we dip below 91%, we're in danger of a number of things. First is we can't certify at 100. So we have to multiply everything by whatever we do certify at. So the homestead exemption that everybody gets, which is $25,000, if we're at, say, 80%, they're only going to get 80% of $25,000.
Back from the state?
Right, right. Also, we have to then, the personal property value that we have to multiply that by, say, again, if 80% is our certified, by 0.8. So we lose out on the tax revenues, which puts pressure on the mill rate. Also, we get reimbursed from the state for the homestead exemption, 76%, I think it is, Megan? 76% of the homestead exemption gets reimbursed to us. So if we're at 80%, it's going to be 80% of 76%. So all along the line, we lose out, which puts pressure on the mill rate. And when I say pressure on the mill rate, I mean the mill rate goes up because of this. So that's why we work so hard to stay at 100%.
And why we authorized the second statistical reval last year.
That's right, right, exactly. Because 2 years in a row, I mean, the market was so great, like Mark had just said, I was trying to cause as less pain as possible. And so I was shooting for 93, 94%. Now, even if I'd gone to 100%, it would have made a difference. But I was hoping that the market would slow down, but it didn't. And in just a year, we were down to 68% again, which is why we had to do the second one.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for keeping an eye on that. Any other questions for Carrie? Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Town Clerk, Liz. And that is page 119.
All right, well, this is the clerk's budget. Again, this is one that's easy, fairly straightforward. Not a lot of changes here. I think the most notable thing for people to know is this is a presidential election year. And while a lot of what the clerk's office does is somewhat static and dependable and reliable for all of us, the variation that goes into their lives when election years hit, and particularly presidential election years. Just looking at Jeff. making sure. I know, I'm trying to, it can be a huge disruption. I think we had talked, Michael, you'd asked, or someone had asked about, is it, or maybe it was Denise, is it easier if you vote absentee as opposed to voting in person versus, there's sort of, I think, at the time you're doing each one, you want them to vote the opposite way, I think. I'm not saying how you vote, but just the method. But it's a lot of work. This is the calendar year, we'll have 3 elections. That's a lot. The first vote in this space, there'll be a vote in June, which will be in the existing year budget, not in the one that's being proposed. But this proposed budget is one that will include that presidential election year. And, you look at, Maine does a very good job of voting. We do a great job of making sure we get out and cast our ballot. And I think that's a credit to all of us. It makes the clerk's jobs harder, but, we have systems in place. We have great personnel who help out, some staff, some volunteers. They do a great job of making that effort go. But it's an incredible undertaking to say, okay, we collect money, we register cars, we take your tax payments, and now it's like record scratch. Now I'm gonna run an election. And the truth is, Liz is doing that for months before the rest of us know it. And that was true of her predecessors, and it's true in every town in the state. But it takes an incredible amount of planning and an organization to do that. So I just talking about the presidential election. So we have some election costs in terms of purchasing, voting booths. I think, we also talked about some of the, what are they called?
Stanchions?
Yeah, stanchions, just to move people. It's amazing. You could put up 1,000 signs, but if you don't have a rope there, people don't know where to go. So you gotta sort of Disney World knows what they're doing. They sort of cattle call everybody through and then they're out. And you sort of have to do that with an election day. It's a whirlwind. So, I think that's really about all that's noticeable here. Would you say, Liz?
Right, yeah.
And that voting day, I think, is a time that our residents actually experience their town government. So it's really
Absolutely.
important that it look and be efficient and managed well.
You know I'm gonna ask a question.
Well, go for
Because
it.
it always got asked us, and Ken was always a good one for keeping the numbers down. So the 522,464 on the revenue for excise tax, the
Yep.
R0109.
Yep.
I assume that only counts for 6 months of the year?
Yep.
Where are we with January and February? Because it appears as if we're gonna be over 1 million. And if that's the case,
Yeah.
that'll be 2 years in a row that we have been.
Yeah, but look at like last year, the graphs.
Well,
on
last year
page
was
125.
1,007,000 was the actual. So we're already,
See,
if you doubled
1,014.
what's there, we're at 1,044.
Yeah.
44,000. So I guess what I'm saying is, because I'm looking at the 43,316 and trying to,
Could you get it to zero?
can you make it to zero? No, but I mean, so where are we with January and February? Does anybody have a number on that?
I think we're gonna have one in a second.
Megan's
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
it up.
I mean, because,
I was sort of noticing that the trends for a couple of the months were lower,
Yeah.
which worried me a little. so.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. A lot of times in January, February, those numbers are always depressed. So you get a little nervous around this budget time. You're like, geez, are we gonna make it? But May, April, and then May, and then really June are usually really strong and help to push you over.
I helped last year,
And I
Yes.
appreciate it. You
He
waited an
did.
awful long time for
and
that.
it hurt.
It does
But we
hurt.
appreciate it. The pain doesn't go without appreciation.
Yeah, I was just looking,
Yeah.
November and December were sort of low compared to, at least last year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a pretty common trend that people wait for their tax returns to pay registrations and buy vehicles and so forth.
Yeah,
And you always know the presidential sales, you know,
Yeah.
they do big,
yeah.
Yeah.
those are,
But they don't come in until March, because you gotta
Yep.
get all you can out of that
Right.
plate.
right, yep,
Max it out, you know?
yep.
Oh my gosh.
I have a question on, this is something I know in Maine where it's up to everybody to just remember that it's time to register their vehicles.
It is,
And so many people don't timely do it because they just haven't even been paying attention. And
correct. And then COVID, the state gave us all a grace period, so it's been a lot to catch up after,
Yeah.
even 2 years ago. After COVID, 4 years ago now, right? People are still,
When people come in and they're like, oh gosh, I totally spaced out last year, so now I'm registering for this year, do they have to pay the excise tax for the prior year?
it's funny, if they go a full year, they do not.
I wondered about that.
No, you're right, but if, right up until that 11th month, they do have to pay and then come back.
Because I know people,
So you just don't get caught.
Right, but we all, it's, you know, the ticket is, sometimes can be worse, but
yeah.
depending on the month, yeah, they play the
But we
game.
haven't, like, and I know it costs money to mail things, you know,
We used to.
other states, you mail people something and it's like,
They do, and a lot of people that have moved to Rockport are very confused by that. And I have to say, in my other, prior to when I was deputy in Camden, when I first started, we mailed cards. And we just stopped and said, it's up to the person to try to remember. It was mailing 500-plus cards a month,
yeah,
you know, it's,
it's a big, I
and
know
that's-
it's a big,
They
yeah.
used to do that in Rockport.
yeah.
And then-
I mean, I'm just thinking that the revenue, if you're gonna potentially lose, I mean, I think of my
Right.
now 104-year-old father-in-law who realized 3 years later he'd forgotten to register his car.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't paying attention, which we should have been. But anyway, I just,
The state has
You hate
had a
to lose
big
that
push
revenue.
recently to, for people to catch up, reminding them, but,
okay,
yeah.
I don't want to belabor the point, but it's just like,
Yeah,
So January, we collected $91,820. February, we collected $60,344. And so far in March, we've collected $61,324.
And let me also add, there is a website, I think it's linked on our website, that you can sign up to get a reminder to renew your registration too. So
Oh.
that's also possible.
okay.
through the
By
state.
email or
Through the
Yeah.
state, yeah, it's
Yeah.
an email.
There's also this nifty
That's great.
calendar on your phone that you can set a reminder.
That's what we
Make
try.
a phone call, right?
So high
like
tech.
that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
I like that idea.
And I'm
Oh,
not
yeah?
trying to help people. I just hate to lose revenue that we could be getting.
We try to remind them, set your reminder or do the BMV. They'll send them an email beginning of the month
Yeah.
to remind them. but-
I mean, those numbers bring in almost 736,000, not quite.
So you're wondering whether we could do something a little bit
I
more
mean,
than
you
a
still got
million?
3 months to go and you know,
It's a little more, yeah.
I mean, we got 80 grand to make up for on public works vehicles, so. Chuck 80 in
Yeah.
here and it offsets it.
well, hang on. That's just because well, you
So
can
that
do
puts us where, Megan?
How much is that a month? Yeah, 736, round numbers,
See this for a second?
150,000
for 9 months.
Pretty much, right on.
You're about at $1 million if you stay, I mean, if nobody buys new vehicles April, May, and June, you're basically at $1 million at that point from where we are now.
So you have 81,777.
I mean, I do think new cars are more readily available than they have been in the past, which I think has slowed down some excise tax.
That's true.
But, so maybe presidential sales and stuff will do better.
But boy, that would be really betting on,
Right, and then that would be, I mean, what, President's Day is in May, they'd have to register it in June.
Right.
That's what the difference is for.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Because Ken would be proud.
Yes,
I think
we
I
would.
could more there.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, President's in February.
One thing,
Yes. She's thinking Patriots.
Oh, Patriots
I think
Day.
President's Day is, yeah.
Patriots Day, sorry.
Yeah,
It's okay.
You said Presidential Day,
I
so
did.
I went with it.
I know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any of those holiday weekends, our industry likes to have sales.
Big car.
Right.
Okay, so,
We good?
yeah,
Oh,
Any others?
it's an unknown. Any other questions?
that's it.
All right, thank you, Liz.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Ms. Liz.
So the excess in her budget goes into,
General.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it goes
Hey,
into
there's
the
our
un-
6 inches of sidewalk.
I was looking at that
Go
today.
Kim.
I drove by and particularly paid attention.
So one thing that, and I'm not to be one to sort of move money around or whatever, but one thing that, the reason why the excise tax was created is for towns to use to fund their maintenance, right?
Road maintenance.
Road maintenance. So
I wrote some paragraphs.
there's an argument to be made that you could, if you were looking at that number, that could be a 1-for-1. I'm not saying take it out of the town clerk's budget, you're doing great, Liz. But in terms of like trying to think that through, that might be a rule of thumb to think about years going forward. I've never mentioned that in the past, but it seems important. If we're over $1 million, if we end up spending money, on road construction, maybe those things should line up. So,
Just from like a place of curiosity, like how often are mill rates for excise tax evaluated? It's like
oh,
the prices for vehicles keep going up, cost of us keeps going up.
I don't know if I've ever seen the rates themselves change. I mean, they change, that new 1-year-old, 2-year-old, but I don't think I've ever seen them adjust the excise tax rates. I could be wrong, Liz, am I wrong? Have you seen?
seen it, no.
I don't,
But I mean,
it's a good point.
But you're basing it, the whole reason for the tax is, like you said, maintenance, and the cost of maintenance is going up in
Yeah,
a parallel.
I get that part, but
Yeah. No, yeah.
And is it fundamentally based on the cost? It's a percentage of the cost of the
yeah,
vehicle?
Original.
Of the original?
yeah.
It's not just vehicles either, it's campers too, in case you feel like buying a camper.
And boats,
And feel free.
Yeah, it was a shocker.
and boats pay
Hold on.
excise tax.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, cancel that purchase. All right, great.
It's in my old card.
Hi, Abby. So we're here, first of all, to talk about the harbor. And that is page 215. Sam here as well.
No,
Yeah, I think this is generally in the same ballpark as what we've been looking at in the past. I think that the most notable issue, or I should say, budget line change is 7513, which is a harbor strategic plan. That's probably the biggest outlier of last year to this year. And just to talk, I think the board's heard me talk about this, and I think others have heard me talk about it, but just to sort of talk about what that is. This is, we mentioned it when we did the initial overview. We are in a seemingly unending cycle of major storms that are battering our harbor, and it seems to be unending and unyielding. We have a conservation commission that is engaged in their own study of climate resilience and looking at a whole bunch of different issues related to climate. But we also have a harbor with some natural, needs of upgrade and upkeep, just part of managing, what that means. And So when you look at the pilings line, which is line right below that, 7505, that's yet another area where that's more of us trying to get on. It's more of us trying to get ahead of the infrastructure needs of the harbor, but it's also a part of us trying to get caught up with these storms and the fact that FEMA's deadlines and timelines are not our timelines by any shape or form. And so when we buy things or when we have to pay for them, sometimes don't line up with our budget year. And that pilings line is example A number one of that. Last year, some of you may remember, we talked a lot about pilings and when are they gonna go in and why is it happening? And by the time we got somebody, there was a lot going on in that harbor, and that was a terrible idea for us to be working on that. We got the job done, and it looks great, and I think Abby's very happy with it. However, you still gotta come, kind of balance those things out with a budget sense. So, we're sort of coming back to and trying to clear up that project and get it paid for and completed. But there is a long-standing need to take a look at all these items, get all the stakeholders in the room. We talked at the board's meeting, was it last time or two? No, it was in March. And then the February meeting, Sam's here and he can certainly speak to, the Harbor Committee. The Harbor Committee's been working hard on rules and that aspect. We've got a Parks Committee that's got some ideas. Those two groups have been talking. We've got the Conservation Commission. We've got a Manly Lobster lease with tanks. We've got Skyhook. We've got all these different stakeholders, and there's a lot of ideas that are fleshed around and get talked around about what should happen, what shouldn't happen. And it really should be the users and the town who should be working together to seek solutions together. And rather than, anything happening, off book, it should be something just in the same way as sort of the VPI effort where everybody's invited to the party. Everyone's invited to participate. Everyone is part of that solution. Obviously, the loudest voices are those who've been involved, but we've got a lot of business owners. We've got a boat club. We've got stakeholders upon stakeholders upon stakeholders who all need their interests represented and discussed and talked about. And so we need a comprehensive effort in the same way you have a comprehensive plan to look at the whole town. I'm advocating for the idea that we have an effort that really just looks at the harbor and engages those stakeholders in that conversation. Might it work out to say, yeah, everything's great that you got exactly as it is, but it should be 3 feet higher because you're all gonna wash away? It could happen. Or they may say something completely different, but those involved and those who are part of making Rockport Harbor what it is need to be front and center at that conversation. And so I think that making this, involving, someone to come in and work with all these stakeholders is our best foot forward in doing so. I think that's not to say anything ill about what has happened, but we need to start with a strong footing underneath it. Because right now, the storms that we're going are doing a number on the strong footing we have right now at the harbor. So that's really the effort for that 60,000 and the idea of bringing someone in to get us a plan. And I just to say a little bit about the plan. So for example, we had a storm that hit us, bless you, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
A
March.
week ago?
Yeah, 10.
I've lost track at
Yeah.
this point. You ask which storm, you mean the one last month or the one 2 months ago or the one 4 months ago? But it was the one a couple weeks ago. So it had done more damage and more erosion, particularly on the side next to the Harbor Masters building, to the point where it had moved the electrical service. we had electric conduit upended. The steps obviously were every which way. Cap rail blown off, not to mention the pier, but that's a whole nother issue. But that's the damage after the storm, we have damage on top of damage. And the problem is what plan are we following to fix that damage? The plan that FEMA wants us to follow, the plan that's best interest of the town, that everyone agrees, this is the standard we want to build this to. We have, Abby was saying, when this first happened, DEP is giving us permission to, without permit, to go up 3 feet. We have the permission, no permits needed, go get it done. But to what end? We can't get FEMA money if we do anything greater than what was already in the ground. So do we throw more dirt back in the same hole that washed out the 3rd time this winter? Or do we do that and then wait for them to come back and allow us to put concrete in, and then 3 years later, when we finally get the money, we're actually able to do it the way we should? That's the sort of dynamic we're working with right now. And Abby and I, and Mike Young and Bill Lane were out, and Curtis and
Last week.
Olson, who's our contractor, who's trying to get some pricing for us on this. And the difficult part wasn't what should be done. You had an engineer, you had a contractor, you had a public works director, you had a harbor master. I was there too, but let's take the other people first. They looked at something and they said, how can we fix that problem? And they all had an idea and they all could work towards the solution. But the problem is, that solution, is not one that FEMA will fund right now. So we have to sort of live in this weird world where we have to bring it back to what's safe. Then we have the level of what we actually can get money for, which is exactly as it was before, which we all know failed. Then there's a third layer, which is the mitigation money, which is what could improve the situation. But to get that means it's competitive and you have to sort of show your muster, and it's not easy to get there. And then there's a 4th level, which is we're on our own. That's just a 3-time storm with washouts, undermining the parking lot next to the boat club and the fisherman's area, undermining the parking, and we have the floats stored right now from Rockport Marine. This is an area this is not going to end, right? We're going to be back here talking about this again next year, and the year after, and the year after. So my hope is, whatever FEMA does, we can't control. But my hope is, at least from Rockport's stake, that the Harbor Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Parks Committee, everyone agrees what the plan is. This is what we need to do to get Rockport Harbor for 2040, 2050, 2070, whatever the target is. I don't know what that number is, but we want the stakeholders to come back to the board at that point and say, this is what we think we need to do to move forward. We don't have the information right now to give you that guidance, I don't think. I think we're doing the best we possibly can. We got a lot of people who care a lot about that space. Abby chief among them, but Sam, his whole committee. There's a lot of people in this town who want that place to succeed. And there's a lot of people out of this town who want this place to succeed. But we need a better plan to back up our staff and to back up the board and to back up our ability to go to, federal agencies and congressional delegations to say we need help. The good thing is everyone else is in trouble too. The whole coast of Maine is at risk, right? We all know that. But we could do a better job of getting staff and the town supported with what works for everybody. And maybe getting to the point of where what works for everybody is hard, but I think we can do it. And I think in large part, some of that's already been done, but I think there's further steps we can go. So I know it's a lot of money, but that's the best that I can sort of come up with in saying, we need a plan. And I hope we can get a plan that works for us.
And you put in 30,000 for a grant.
Yep.
On the 60, so it's.
Yep, there's a grant program, it's got $300,000 in it, so to expect 10% of that is maybe asking a lot, but I think we've already done preliminary work on that project, and I think that grant program will, submission of that's in May. We certainly have the damage to show that we are a town in need, I think. In need of a plan. Whether or not we're in need, whether we're an eligible grant funder, I don't know, but there's not supposed to be matching funds in it, but to do the type of study I think we're looking at, we need to have a more robust than what I think they could come up with just on its own. If they were to give us $10,000, I don't think that gets us far enough down the road with the type of vision that I think we need to involve. And involving all our stakeholders. Very quickly, all of us in the room could, for $10,000, could probably come up with something. But there's a long list of people who aren't in this room who have some good, valuable insight. And I think we should be listening.
I don't know if I missed, the 60,000 is based on an estimate somebody
Yep.
gave? Okay.
Yep, so we had reached out to landscape architect, Viewshed,
Okay.
and they provided us with a quote. Involved that's a public process. Not saying it'd be at the level of what LFF is doing, but with the park, but probably more akin to what we've seen with the VPI effort. I think that's probably more of the level of involvement you'd see from an outside contractor. But, I expect that it's Rockport residents and Rockport stakeholders that are going to, it's their voices with those of an engineering or landscape architect background that'll make those, it's gonna be Rockport at driving that bus, and Rockport's people.
To determine the desires, but to
Yeah.
actually do the analysis and all that stuff is what the 60 grand is.
Exactly right, yeah.
The presentations were,
Yep.
okay.
What they would recommend or what they see as
Right.
ways to protect our harbor.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I think the VPI was more of a committee with different people who were interested, and then it was a bit more, what do you think? I think this will be more of meeting with stakeholders and involving, and also have a steering committee, basically creating a smaller version of a task force appointed by the board. So when you were to support this idea, the next piece would be create another task force with, representation from the Harbor Committee and Conservation Commission, and because those pieces need to talk to each other. It won't work if, it's just one or it's just the other. Everyone needs to be talking, everyone needs to be part of the solution. So,
So,
Any other questions for Abby with the harbor masters?
That seawall reserve, I'm assuming you would put it in just because you wanted to have some money to do something with it. I think that, for me, we just spent an hour or whatever, half hour, talking about how we know that there's an issue. We might as well start saving for it, because that's the same thing as why we spread out KRT's appraisal, right? Appraisal cost, because we can lessen the blow a bit, so why don't we just save a substantial chunk? Because there's no project that's gonna happen down there that's gonna be cheap.
No, you're right.
So we might as well look at an
So we might
overall
as well-
plan, put that money into the plan. I put it in, and John, it was sort of strategic to have this conversation to say,
Yeah,
well, let's
right.
put it into the 60,000 to see, because my biggest fear is putting things back, just throwing good money at a bad situation. So we should really have a plan as to how we're mitigating what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we put it into a reserve, it's not like we're just gonna lose it. If magically we don't use it next
Yeah.
year or the year after, then we
Right,
can
it's
just
something, yeah.
slide it over to the credit reserve, float reserve, whatever, but it's, I don't think it's ever a bad idea to plan, earmark money for something that is going to need to be spent.
Yeah, it's true. No, I agree with that. Absolutely.
How did you come up with a $60,000 number for the strategic plan?
It was a quote we received from Viewshed. We didn't go out to get 3 quotes because certainly we weren't hiring them, but we were just trying to get a ballpark in terms of what's a budget number we could plug in.
Is that a little bit above what they offered, or?
No, it was 60. So,
Well,
their costs go up a little bit.
I guess where I'm going is I'm looking at the use of reserves and the
Yeah.
putting money into reserves, and you know, we've got $18 in the harbor building reserve, $18 and change. I mean, that's a sad, you know, I mean, there ought, like you were saying, Clay, I mean, there ought to be some, you know, 5, 10,000, whatever, because, you know, if you're gonna stain it down the road, you know, you gotta have some money somewhere, so that helps lessen the blow. And I mean, even the numbers for the boat and the hull are nowhere near what it would take to replace it, and hopefully it lasts long enough for us to get that money in there, but, you know, I mean, I'd like to see some money in the building reserve if there's a way that you can do it, you know, somewhere else along the line, maybe to, as they would say, rob Peter to pay Paul, take it out of somebody else's. And
Still rather have a shorter sidewalk and a strong seawall.
well, there again, 8 more inches of sidewalk.
Yeah,
Clay giveth, Clay taketh away.
I do have a question. I mean, I'm nitpicking here, and I apologize for that.
Oh, hey, you
But
may pick away.
If we talk about like public relations merchandise, there's a 200% increase in that funding this year.
yeah.
But if we look at public or merchandise sales, they never come close to that number. So what are we trying to do there?
Yeah, what line are you on?
So
5435?
yeah, that's the merchandise and sales is R0806. I'm going back.
Yeah, well, we have cut it some, so the idea, we're talking to John about having a person, if you look in the personnel line, having a dedicated office staff person. While we were talking about the budget, John was like, well, if we have a dedicated office staff person, maybe we can, you know, up our merchandise sales, because someone will be there all the time, whereas before it was catch someone when we weren't doing something else to do something. So if we spend a little bit more money this year, could hopefully make more money this year as well.
What is the merchandise?
In the past, we've done T-shirts, we've done mugs, and last couple of years, we've just done pretty much hats. We've done the Andre book, which was really successful. So I think with the $3,000, we can sort of stock that better this year. And if we have somebody there,
Do you have?
when people come in.
Do you have stock?
We have probably 10 hats left from last year.
Enough?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that brings me to my question. Why are we budgeting to pay for somebody's credit card use? Under 3746, credit card processing fee. I mean, why don't we include that in the cost of
We do.
them doing business with us?
There's a revenue for that. We charge them to use a credit card, but we have to
Yes.
show the expense and then the revenue.
Where
So
is
it's
that?
the
So we do a
third
surcharge.
revenue up from the
Third.
bottom.
Processing fees, that's 800, that's good. Sorry, I take back my,
It's a good question, that's what it's paid for.
Actually, it looks like we're making money, so that's good.
that's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah. 7345, the 19,000 for the pylons. How many does that, it doesn't say in the description how many that buys. How many does that get us?
So it's about $1,500 per piling driven, and it gets a little complicated because we have stock. Because of what John was talking about with the overlapping of the FEMA stuff, so we were able to buy. So one thing I will say about the pilings is that we used to use these $100 oak pilings, and you can go down there and see all the spindly ones that are all broken off, and we had an opportunity to replace them with pressure treated and a bigger gauge piling. So if you go down there now, I mean, they're beefy and they held up really well in that. So to answer your question, Mark,
About
at
13?
15, yeah, about 13 or 14, yep.
How many more do you need beyond that?
We need about. So we started to space, because they're bigger, we were able to space them out longer too. So we need about 4 or 5 to finish the park side, and then they'll be all larger diameter pressure treated pilings, which will get us in great shape. And then the fisherman side, this is a bit of a stab in the dark, but it's probably 15, 20 more to finish off completely finish off that side with the larger bore PT pilings and be, up where we need, where.
So probably 2 more years worth of budgeting for those.
Yes.
And we're good for a bit.
Yeah, because we're gonna get a lot more. We're only seeing 5 or 6 years with the oak pilings. And these pilings we'll see, hopefully, 15, 20, if not longer. They're big.
So if, I'm just spinning that out a little bit. If you're going to make adjustments to the height of the seawall, whether it's right in front of your place or down past Andre or on the fisherman's side, are we taking into account the pole length so that we don't raise it 2 feet, but now that 4-foot-high pole is only 2 feet away from it?
Right. So we will start going to a 35, well, we're using 30-footers now. We will start going high and not cutting them. So we were cutting them. We
Yeah.
actually kept some of them higher. So 3 feet would still get us, still some visual barrier. So we're trying to think ahead, best we can.
Sounds good.
Okay. Anything else for Abby and Sam?
I've got just a couple quick ones. On the seawall reserve, there are a couple of cheap things that I would see recommending in the short term. The Harbor Committee has recommended some riprap on the south-facing, wall where, the wave hit really slaps and is blowing out the, ground. And making a bit of a wedge there would help a lot. So keeping something in that seawall reserve, isn't just budgeting for the big piece of work. It's, there's some small things too.
So the south-facing wall, like on the harbor master?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
really close to the harbor master, yeah,
Like
right.
Goodies Beach.
Yeah, I mean,
Where we get the most-
consideration
Yeah.
is it would, you couldn't jump off, the kids couldn't jump off that anymore safely. The other one, I haven't seen the view shed quote. I'd be interested to see what their deliverable
Yeah.
is for that.
I don't know if Abby or Ryan has, but I'm sure either of them could get it to you.
Yep.
Sam, yeah. And I think, again, it's not, the idea of it is, I think it's identified what it is, but in terms of specifically what those deliverables would be, largely would be driven by this group, this task force that would be created and really trying to gear it towards that group.
Yeah,
So-
even if we just understood how many hours they're budgeting.
Yeah. Yep, it makes sense.
Okay. Anything else? All right, next is Conservation Commission. Okay, and that is page 265. We've got Abby and we have Bilbo.
And Megan was intending to be here, so depending
Yeah,
how
she was
long I talk, she'll,
texting me. She was on for 8, so.
yeah, I just texted her about
Okay.
10 minutes
Oh,
ago, so.
we're ahead of ourselves, aren't we?
Okay.
Good
Not a
job.
bad thing.
Do we talk slow
Yeah.
or more?
Just keep doing this.
Yeah, I know.
Not more,
I'm
John.
used to getting this, so I don't know what I'm doing.
We don't know what to do at this point.
Not more.
Okay,
So again, this is a largely unchanged budget with one major change, which was a request for a piece of equipment. And you can read about that 269. I'm gonna ask Bill to maybe talk about that and what that piece of equipment does. I'll just go into my reasoning as to why I didn't, or why I sort of phrased it the way I did. And basically, what I suggest is we put that money into a reserve. I didn't feel as though that this was a year that we could buy a large piece of equipment for this need. There were some conversations, we've heard them, those who attended the meeting with the wastewater, task force meeting, talking about Glen Cove, talking about other areas of water quality. Water quality in Rockport is high on everyone's priority list. Having said that, $20,000 was in this budget is a bit more, out of character, but so what I had proposed in here is to take 5,000 and create a reserve and save towards that money over several years and then purchase. So that was my attempt to try to get part of the way towards what the Conservation Commission had proposed, but over a period of time. So that was my effort, but Bill, maybe you can enlighten us all on why
Sure.
I'm completely wrong-headed.
So, never.
Won't be the first one.
Right. So we do, with the water monitoring in general, we monitor three things. We monitor the lakes, and we monitor the rivers, and we monitor the harbor. And they each take a slightly different, we monitor the lakes under a state program called Lake Stewards Monitor. It's a DEP program that's delegated to this little group, and they have certain protocols. We have to do this, that, and the other thing to deal with the lakes. We then monitor the rivers, which is really the Goose, Ott Brook, Harkness Brook, Lily Pond Stream, and Winter Street Ditch when it's got water flowing in it. We monitor that pursuant to what's called the VRMP, the Voluntary River Monitoring Program. And they have their own little gig of how they want things done against a DEP program, but they don't really talk to the lake stewards. And then the third one is the harbor itself. And that's a different type of monitoring because unlike, Lily Pond Stream, that's you bend over and you take the sample with your hand, we're going down 20, 30, 40 meters out at the RO buoy. So we need a different kind of equipment for that. And so there's the equipment that John's talking about that was in the budget was we'll call it a data sonde, but basically it's a big cylinder and you lower it down and you measure all sorts of properties of the water on the way down, whether that's temperature, or pH, or salinity, or dissolved oxygen, and blah, blah, blah. And then we pull individual samples for phosphorus and for chlorophyll and for nitrogen and for bacteria. We do that by hand. The piece of equipment we've got is about 10 to 15 years old. And last summer, we used part of it in June, but it was broken. We then used equipment for the Lake Steward monitor in July because it got sent off for repair. And then we got it back and we were able to use it in September for its intended use. So we got 1.5 out of 3 events because of all the cha-cha we're dealing with because the equipment's just old and it's breaking. So the concept is, if we're going to keep this effort up, we need to get a new one. The other beauty of these newer ones is that you can actually deploy them in the water and leave them there and for days and data log the data as it comes in. So when we think about salinity changes in the harbor, we go out at noon on a high tide and take the salinity, or we take it with a pen at the surface. But if you leave it in there, you can start to really see how the water is being distributed around the harbor. That has issues with respect to the Goodies Beach bacteria problem with regard to the storm drain that pumps in. So this is a way for us to improve the kind of monitoring we're doing. I also at the same time understand the need to perhaps sort of eke that in over time. So while I'd love to be able to buy a piece of new equipment this year, I get why. Just making sure if Megan came in, she got her ability to say. But that's been the issue. We have a piece of equipment that is broken down and gets repaired way too much. And it'd be nice to have something a little bit newer. That's the plea.
Okay.
So if it were put off as a reserve thing for 4 years,
We'd survive. Well, now 4 might be a little harsh, to be honest, because that thing's on life support, the other one.
yeah,
I
'cause
mean,
that's
it's-
what I was wondering, if it dies in 6 months, then are we in a panic
How
where we
critical,
need to
so
have
you're doing the
something?
other water quality monitoring,
In the lakes and the rivers, right?
but
And
the harbor is all dependent on this data sonde.
It really is. And give another example. There is a depth transducer in it. The deeper you go, the higher the pressure. The transducer works right if you're at 50 or 60 feet down. The instrument says 50 or 60 feet. If it's broken, it's more like 30 because it's broken. So we end up having to mark the cable and go, well, we're really at 60 even though the instrument's telling us 30. So mathematically, in other words, it's just a pain in the neck. The pH meter wasn't working last year, the salinity meter wasn't working last year. We figured it out, but the data quality effort is really not there. So we'll keep it going, and right now it's been repaired. Hypothetically, it came back in August, and Bob Kennedy and I took it out, along with Jeff Runge, and it worked. Perfect.
Okay.
So,
What do we spend repairing it? What line is repairing this equipment?
That's a good question. Megan, what did we spend last year on repairing the sound? Was it just a few $100, wasn't it?
I didn't see it spent out in the budget,
Yeah,
honestly, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think, to some degree, Bob has been very good at guilting them into fixing it because it was their piece of equipment. But it's,
That works.
so I guess,
yeah, and it worked.
Are there
I'm
any
not proud.
fines or penalties that could be imposed upon the town by not reporting this data? I mean, is it?
No, this is an effort for us to understand what's going on in the harbor with respect to, we've got big bacteria issues. The US EPA has come to us in 2013 and sent a letter that said, it's called a notice of violation. And they sent a letter that said, you are in violation of the Water Quality Act or the Clean Water Act because of your bacteria problems. That was 2013. We submitted a response to that in 2020, I think it was, that said, look, we're doing the best we can. That may be good enough for them, but it may not. They may turn around and come back in 3 years and go, well, you're going to do better, so here's a consent order. So the more data we have and the cleaner that it is and defensible that it is, it's just a better thing.
so I don't know, I mean, a number of years ago, Zach, they did a lot of well testing for people around town. I don't remember how many was done. But to your point, I mean, because under the description in here, it says, used for 6 years of water quality monitoring, it's undergone repairs and is still non-functional, but yet you're saying it is. We're trying to figure out.
It's working well enough, okay, but when you have to adjust the depths, when the pH isn't right, when the salinity meter's whacked out, and you figure out that it's flooding because there's cracks in the unit because it's old, it's, yes. Is it working? Yes. Is it working as well as it really oughta? No, it's not.
Also, at the time we submitted this budget, it wasn't working, so if then we get back.
Yeah.
But the life on these things isn't.
Yeah, we're keeping it the breath of life.
Is there, I'm trying to lobby, I mean, for a number of years I was the liaison, but I was sort of there, not there, admittedly. And I would lobby for these guys to, because I know their heart's in it. And in the grand scheme of what they do, I think it's very important for our overall water quality around, whether it's wells that get tested or lakes that people now can swim in perhaps because they know they're okay. If there's another 8 inches of sidewalk that you can do without.
I'll give up half a
Well,
foot.
I mean, because, rightly so. I mean, you got a 5,000 if you're going to do it 4 years. 4 years from now, this equipment's not going to be 20,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would lobby.
So what are
sooner
you
than
suggesting,
later.
Mark, that you want to put it all back in?
I would lobby sooner than later. I mean, if there's a way that you can, because this group doesn't get enough of a pat on the back.
Do you need the car more than you need this piece of equipment?
What car?
No, it's,
Huh?
Oh, that's a capital item, never mind.
Somebody else's.
their
Well, Liz
budget.
has extra.
Jumped ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
budget-
did.
their
So it's on the
budget's-
wrong page.
Yeah, that's all right.
I mean, we're talking.
We'll get there.
Thank you.
Of all the budgets that are in there, this is an $18,000 budget. And
Or 33,000.
We'll add, also the adding municipal fund will, you can often use that as a match for state funds to get more money for this.
I guess I would just say,
I'm,
Yeah, I mean, if
I
they're
would
in.
advocate for yes also. Yeah, yeah,
food for thought.
because it's.
I don't know if Bill already said this.
Go for it, again.
But we did have a gap analysis done by FB Environmental, who's working on our climate resilience plan. And as part of that, they actually identified more parameters in Greater
frequency at which we should be sampling to get better water quality results. So adding parameters as well as adding frequency. So this kind of data sum will allow you to do a continuous deployment where you can just put it out there and collect hourly data, as well as you can switch it out and add various parameters, and you can use it in fresh and salt water. So I think currently we're only using it in the salt.
Just in the harbor, yeah. We've got some other stuff for the lakes and rivers.
So you could really add capacity to this program with a fairly small investment.
And you would, you'd keep this other one sort of as a backup, or?
Oh, absolutely.
You could use it elsewhere for other monitoring and?
No, as long as it's working, it's working. I don't know if I'd fix it again if we had a new one, but,
This seems like one of those things where there's definitely a grant for.
I would hope.
Worth checking out, I guess.
Yeah, worth looking into.
So,
Okay.
everybody's quiet.
Anything else on, questions on this, or?
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Now you're good.
127.
Okay, so this is the planning budget for the coming year. I think largely my share of the budget here is a status quo with changes that we talked, vehicle, and we'll talk about the furniture and fixtures in a moment. We do have a departure, so Sierra Larry's no longer working with the town. So we do have a vacancy in that administrative assistant position. We're going to be talking about, Orion and I will be sort of reevaluating and reexamining what that position does and how to better try to use that position in how we connect and relate with the community. Which isn't to say anything of prior, people in that position priorly have not, but this, anytime you have a change, it's a good time to sort of step back and say, is this the right way to go about doing what we're doing? And so, we're in that process today. Orion and I had some great chats this afternoon, and I think, we're gonna have something on that in terms of the job. There's still a need for that support, less so really, I don't wanna say less so for support of Scott and Orion's place, but more so in support of the rest of us who wanna get something done in the town of Rockport. This position really is about all of us. How do I get a permit for a shed? Hey, I've got a problem with a barking dog next to my house. Is there anything in the ordinance that can be done about that? Can I set up a meeting with Scott? I mean, those are all pieces of that position that I think how we utilize them and how we sort of best get that position, I don't wanna say bang for the buck, but how do we all get the best out of that position? So, more to come on that, but it's a definite need, and unfortunately, given the amount of time our code officer has, his time is in short supply, so scheduling that heavily and scheduling where he's going and who he's talking to. Unfortunately, the days of being able to breeze in and walk past the open door and, hey, Scott, how's it going? I've got this, da-da-da-da-da. Those days are gone for all of us, so even I can't do that, so, and I work there, so, it's something, it's just part of our growing. It's part of our growing process as a town, and there's sad parts of it, there's good parts of it. And even though we've made the change to a 40-hour work week for our code officer, there's still not enough time to get those things done. And there's still obviously needs for backup and support in that way. And so part of the larger request from Ryan was to find a way to support alternate code enforcement, basically a deputy of sorts to not only support when Scott is out of the office, but also to provide a buffer and provide lower level inspections and support for those of us who are trying to get things done in the town. And then open up more room for code enforcement to do more enforcing. We went through quite an exhaustive bit of work with the Red House on the corner of Main Street and Simon's Corner. You all know that we talked about it off air, but the house is down now. It took quite a bit of effort from Scott's office and Scott himself. Pretty much everyone in this room had some role in that. Ryan had a role in it, I had a role in it. The board had a big role in it, but that's just one property in a town full of situations sometimes where these need to be addressed, and we're not being aggressive about them. They're coming to us when they apply. When there are issues, when it's being brought up, and no code officer really wants to be out there looking for problems, right? You want to, like law enforcement, you want to keep the peace, right? But we have ordinances for a reason, and there are certainly, I think, situations where we could be more aggressive and handle situations not unlike the house that also need to be addressed and probably have similar action taken. Maybe by the landowner, not by the board, but anyway. So Ryan and I talked about that. My feeling was not to move forward with that in this budget. I really wanted to operate from the perspective of where we are, but I'm very sympathetic to the need for support. When you have a long-term employee takes vacation, you need somebody to answer those calls. And right now our code officer is answering those calls. He shouldn't be, but he is. And credit to him and sort of what he's done for the town of Rockport and his interest in appreciating the town of Rockport. But that's not fair to him, and the town really shouldn't be in that position to call someone on when they're dealing with other stuff or they're on vacation. Scott's not going to Cabo, but he should be able to go to his house and not get a call from Orion or me saying, hey, something's going on. So the budget I'm presenting you doesn't fix that problem. But again, it's another one of those situations, just like the data sond or any of these other, they're good ideas, but I don't feel like we can afford them given all the other things we're asking for. So in a future year, would I have a different change of heart? Yeah, I would. I think we need to talk about it. There may be opportunities with the firefighter EMTs that we're bringing on board. Perhaps there's some overlap there, but we have to sort of figure out what's the line of life safety, and I think that requires fully more conversation about certificates of occupancy and what's the role of life safety versus other code enforcement needs. But I don't want to get into that now. That we could be talking about that all night. But I think that's one area we can talk about. Elsewhere in the budget, the lease purchase of the vehicle, that's largely relating to the issues that we've seen with the old cruiser that we took on. So just to get a sense of what had happened, the timetable, the budget 2 years ago, we ended mileage reimbursements for employees with the idea that we were going to take the old Explorer cruiser and move that over to the town office, which was in better shape, and have that as the sort of the car for code enforcement, assessing, and we were going to end mileage. And I think in large part, I think in some part it's worked well. The challenges that that Explorer ended up going to Buildings and Grounds because we needed them to be able to get around to fix the Buildings and Grounds, shocker. So then we got the Cruiser, the second tier. And this is the one we talked about at one point with Randy about the $4,000 exhaust. They had the $4,000 exhaust, we're going to have the $4,000 exhaust repair. Anyone who's driven that car would say this thing is not in its best shape. It's not in a great position to be able to go down roads. Scott will take his personal vehicle when he's going down a road that's not in great shape. And, you know, when you're going on new job sites, the last thing you're gonna do is worry about the driveway. So he's taking his personal vehicle on those calls. So to forestall expensive repairs, I'm advocating sell the Cruiser that we have and do a lease purchase to get a new vehicle to replace it. So we're $10,000 is what we put aside on that. Again, something that can all-wheel drive, that can get where it needs to get to. And then the fixtures and the furniture and fixtures is really just about the changes, the modifications to the office, and the fact that we're going to have Scott in a new space, and then really it's more the assistant will be moving into Scott's old office, and that you need. Anyone who's been in there knows you got to shoehorn whatever's in that office out, and her desk won't fit in that new space. So that's the budget there. Is there anything else I missed, Orion, or anything that you want to add to what I said?
No, you hit it all.
So, I mean, we didn't talk about the harbor. I mean, it seems though everybody's getting a vehicle. I mean, you didn't talk about the UTV at the harbor that got taken out of the budget.
Yep, that's right. We got it out.
But-
That's why we didn't talk
I mean,
about
but-
it.
Well, no, but I mean, it's there, and everybody's sort of
Well,
gonna
there's
have.
requests, but.
It was a request, but
No.
not, it's not,
No, I know, but it's here for your
Yeah.
perusal.
On the table.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know,
not doing
and I'm thinking about the highway truck,
Yep,
the one that I
Right.
think Kevin uses mostly now,
Yep.
and we were gonna get another one,
yep.
and, I mean, you know, if you listen to anybody that drives that truck, that's the best thing since sliced bread.
Sure.
So why not take that one instead of getting rid of it and hand that down? I mean, you know, I guess I'm just trying to find a way to,
Yeah.
I mean, how many miles does he actually drive a year?
We don't track the number of miles that someone's driving because, and also
Well, you pay-
whoever it is, we're talking about different departments. We have two different departments,
Yeah.
whether it's assessing or it's planning and codes. Predominantly it's planning and codes that are using it, but again, that doesn't, even if we're tracking just the mileage on the vehicle, we're not counting he's putting on the personal vehicle because he can't use it. So, and the larger point, I agree with you, it's growing. You know, and the need is growing, I guess is what I'm saying.
We're growing government by adding people and
Yeah.
adding vehicles.
Yes.
And we still have neglected roads that are in there.
Yep.
And I'm trying to find a way in my head to say, without being a horse's patoo,
Yeah.
to say, okay, maybe government, I'm wearing many hats from previous years.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, this fixing things isn't gonna go away, and it's gonna be more expensive
Nope.
next year.
Right.
And what is there that you're asking for to grow government by personnel and/or vehicles and/or other things that you can wait a little bit, like a year, and maybe take care of some of the infrastructure? That was sort of gonna be my spiel down the road, but while we're right here.
We get the shorter version.
Yep, no, it will be, that's a
Yeah.
shorter one, I guess
Yeah.
I'm a proponent of fixing all those streets that still
Yeah.
need to be paved, which is gonna cost more money next year versus people and cars and,
Yeah.
but that's your,
I mean, if
Well,
we're
it's all
putting on,
ours.
10,000 for a lease for a vehicle, right? That's, what is that in mileage a year?
must be a minimum.
I mean, you know,
That's what I was wondering
what's the
is-
federal mileage, 68 cents a mile?
Yeah, something like that.
So you're 16 grand paying in mileage, 16,000 miles will cover expensed mileage, right? So are our employees that are gonna use this vehicle gonna be driving 16,000 miles a year?
No.
And if not, then it's gonna be cheaper to expense mileage.
And why are these cars that aren't very old, that are being moved from one farm to other, failing? I have a hard time buying a cruiser that's 6 years old, 7 years maybe.
Well, I mean, they also
Seven.
drive it like a cruiser.
I understand that.
Right.
But like,
Yeah.
these guys don't, so I mean, like, if we repair them, then shouldn't we get more life out of them versus being driven like a cruiser? Like a $4,000 fix versus $25,000 or however.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, right, that's the balance, but it's $4,000 into something old as opposed to $10,000 into something that's reliable
Sure,
and
but that
new.
4,000 is something
So-
old, driven by planning and
Yeah, I mean, it's,
You know, like-
right, and it's used for a number of uses, but yeah, I mean, is there, could you put off a purchase a year and say, you know, we don't need a $10,000 purchase this year? Absolutely. The challenge is then you're gonna have to put in, you would have to put in mileage for all these employees that we're currently not paying mileage for. So it's not, it wouldn't be a $10,000 savings if we cut it. It becomes, now we're gonna add 3,200 here, 3,200 here, 3,200 here.
But I
And
mean,
it won't
the lease
take long
payment-
before we get
The lease payment, you
beyond
also
10.
have to add expenses for repairs, fuel, insurance, all that stuff,
yeah.
which is wrapped into that 68 cents a mile.
Well, we have, right, and we have gas in here too, but there aren't gonna be many repairs for a new vehicle. You're gonna
So,
have, you
Is
know.
the reason
minimal-
that we are not doing mileage reimbursement for employees, is it because we think it'll be cheaper to have our own car? Is it, why are we discouraging that approach?
I think that was the board's decision at that point, was that they felt that
Okay.
it was
Mark?
cheaper for us to manage using our own vehicles, but
Okay.
How many of
you
these
can
cars-
speak to it.
No, I
mean,
raised my hand.
It was your motion, I think,
I
but,
raised my hand and said,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, because I think if you factor in if Scott's out doing work for the town and he's in an accident in his vehicle,
right,
you
Then
know,
what?
then that becomes our problem.
How many of these vehicles, go home with employees? Is it advertised as a benefit perk to attract and retain personnel too?
well, two, yeah. But police is a little different because of, you know, the
Yeah, sure.
contract, but two town police, yeah.
Which departments?
Public Works and Fire,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Because
So-
I want to make sure I think of the same vehicle. You're talking about that silver,
The silver one.
the beastie thing?
Yeah.
where When I sat in the back.
Remember when we did the drive
and
around
then
with it?
I had to make sure you would let me out of the car
That's
because the inside door handles.
That's right, yes.
Because it was a police car.
Yes,
That car's not funny, right? But,
yeah.
but the $10,000 a year, if it's only used for those departments,
And anyone, I mean, if you go to if you go to a convention or what have you,
Yeah.
you know, we sort of try to lean people towards that. Nobody wants to take that car, you know,
But
because
it's, in Clay's reasoning.
Yeah.
Like, if you got 10 grand, that's a lot of miles that you could put on.
yeah,
But earlier, I thought I heard that that car really wouldn't get very many miles.
it wouldn't get 10,000 miles. I was 16,000 miles. No, certainly. I mean, I can't imagine we would run that amount of mileage in a given year. But I couldn't tell you where it stands now. I think that the reason why this came up is, do we spend $4,000? Do we budget for a repair now for what will happen?
Yeah.
Or do we budget for the replacement of a 7-year-old vehicle that was ridden hard by a police department?
Well,
I think that was the balance and
And-
power of that.
And that's also just for an exhaust that he knows about. If you drive it, you'll
Exactly,
hear
yeah.
the
That's just
wheel
where my
hub
brain was
system
going
right now
with this.
crunching every time you take a left or a right, so. And it's,
So that's one issue, is whether we replace that with a new car, or do we go back to employees getting reimbursed for mileage?
Yeah, that's the balance.
Yeah. And the
But
value.
then, like Mark said, that opens up another can of worms if there's an accident on town business, and it's,
Right, but whether they're driving a town car, I mean,
if we're
you
gonna
know,
go
fall
down that
to the
road,
accident,
then
then-
we have to stop letting firefighters drive their own vehicles to calls.
Well, true.
So we're already headed down that road, so we might as well go with mileage. 'cause
The
it's
way our
gonna be-
insurance works, if an employee is on town business in their personal vehicle, it still hits the employee's insurance, and our insurance will cover that employee's deductible.
But, and then
Which is
the
how it
employee
should
is
be.
without a car for a while.
I mean, which brought
It's a
up in mind,
dilemma.
I remembered seeing it back on Carey's, department had mileage for parking, mileage and parking for the assistant assessor of a little over $1,700. So we're
We're doing that for some.
page 151, 3105.
I agree, it doesn't make sense to spend 4,000 on an exhaust system and then
I missed
accidentally
that one.
breaks and shocks or whatever.
Wheel
Because it's
bearings.
not in,
Tie rod.
it's not where it should be, so.
That was
Yeah,
at
it's-
that
I
point
mean,
with
it's
my other car.
3105 on the travel expenses on the,
Nickel and dime on that
on
old
page
car.
149.
I know, that
And the
one's a tough one.
explanation on 151 is,
Yeah.
department and mileage and parking for assistant,
Oh,
for
I think-
assistant assessor.
I know what that is. That has more to do with their trips to, when they go to their convention. It's not to do with around town, it's more of a one-off with.
It's still mileage, it doesn't make.
It is, but we
whatever.
wouldn't let them take that car, for example, if they were going to,
You don't think it would make
their
it?
annual. I wouldn't wanna take it.
Well, yeah,
I'd take my own car if that was the case, around town, I know that if it broke down, I could call Travis and he'd come, hey, can you bring Orion back? I wouldn't trust it to go to Portland, definitely not. And that's sort of my thing, is I don't wanna put someone else in a vehicle I wouldn't really trust myself. And that's sort of but there's 100, like, as I think Denise put it, if you wanna say we're gonna go back to the old way and we're gonna put mileage in, that's okay. But if we're gonna drive town vehicles, we have to make sure that they're reliable and make sure that we minimize our repair costs to the best of it. And frankly, probably, talk about mileage and, what are we getting per mile in that car as opposed to,
miles per gallon.
whatever it is that's out today, 35, 40 miles a gallon.
And recognize that if we are doing mileage reimbursement, that's more time for Megan or somebody to sort of just do the bookkeeping.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and you gotta figure in Megan, somebody's time to do all the monthly paperwork and check writing versus having your own vehicle. But, so yours, so you're talking a 3-year lease, or, I mean, because if the mileage isn't gonna be that much, I mean, what's the total mileage that people put on a year? 5,000 total between all the departments?
Well,
Between the
for
ones
this
that
car?
would use this car.
yeah, 5 to 10, probably, yeah.
So why lease it then? I mean, because if you're
Yeah.
gonna have a 3-year-old vehicle with
Right, 30,000 miles at most.
30,000 or,
Yeah.
I mean, then you're just gonna turn around and do it again, buy it out after the lease and keep it for 3 years. or-
I think once we got into it, I think that's what I'd probably suggest, we came back around a year and see it's worked out, and that's what we'd wanna do.
I mean, the question that I guess I worry about as well, we have one vehicle and the police is up and, well, maybe we just keep it for the next personnel that we
Yeah.
make a position for, cause we're continuing to grow.
Yeah.
And then we have another vehicle, and then we have another vehicle,
There's
and
no-
then we have 2 crews, and now we've got a full-time.
If I could stop the clock and stop the change, that would be great, Clay. And just deal with the problems that we have. I wish I had that ability. I just don't. We've got more more wastewater problems in another way than that, nothing to do with wastewater. Trying to stop the clock and deal with what hasn't happened and fix what ails us. If we could just do that, my life, it would be miserable. It'd be a hell of a lot better than it is right now. We have so many different problems right now coming at us. It's scary. And I don't want to make this a big thing, but we have to somehow stay focused on the bigger issues, those things that are gonna cost us more tomorrow than today. But I wish I could stop everything else to only focus on those, because those are the ones that'll kill us, right? Meanwhile, we have to keep the business going. I think that's what these sort of issues are. This is about us keeping the business going, so that way we are able, try to focus on that. I'm not focused on the $4,000 repair or the cruiser that hit the mailbox a couple weeks ago. I'm only focused on the 8 inches of sidewalk we're not gonna do, or things like that. That's where we have to be, that's where we have to focus our time. And I look at this as a way to do that. It costs us money, but I look at that as a way, I'm not gonna have to worry about that car. That's one less headache. Instead, I can focus on, you know, how are we gonna offer the services better? How can we spend a little less time worrying about an old car and more on squeezing FEMA for more money or whatever it is? That, to me, is worthwhile.
I just happen to think too, seeing the 10,000 there looks shocking, but when you really think offsetting that compared to what the mileage rate would be, are we talking like $2,000 difference? I mean, I don't need the numbers.
Yeah.
But there's an offset, so the 10 grand wouldn't.
Well, do we have the mileage number still in here?
Well, while you're looking that up also,
And that's assuming that everybody that needed to do some business had their own car available who could figure it out, like, to use
I mean,
it.
if you're only budgeting $1,000 for gasoline, that's only gonna get you. I mean, what do you have?
That was also for training items, so upcoming training events that I knew about, calculating the mileage for me to go to or for Scott to go to.
Right.
That's what that was really budgeted for.
For the gasoline.
Right, I have no idea how to budget for all of his upcoming inspections. So he just keeps a log of it and then we run with it.
So that's just to pay for for fuel that's going in his personal vehicle.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did that right, but even at 8,000 miles, it's 68 cents a mile, it's like $5,400.
Yeah.
the other advantage of a new car is that you could get in at the middle of the wave of plug-in hybrids. And there are months, I used to fill up every week, and now there are months where I'm good for 30 days if I'm just doing local stuff. So the first 30 miles on my car, and it's not a particularly efficient plug-in hybrid car, but there's no fuel involved. So,
I mean, I could run the numbers to estimate what mileage reimbursement would be. I mean, it's gonna be hard because we haven't done mileage reimbursement in a couple of years, but try to estimate what that would be for the departments that use the car, and I guess you guys can make the decision.
Yeah, and I'm not, I
whether
think,
it's mileage or the
I mean,
car.
even if it's a shared, if you get one vehicle and it's a shared vehicle amongst 3 people, and that everybody knew that on certain days of the week it was yours, and certain days of the week it was yours, you know.
well, that's all
Or
they're talking about
On
right
a
now,
daily
right?
truck check to drive across town and back, it could be theirs for that window of time.
And the net difference is,
And
it
then
can't
we
be
could
that
get
much
rid of that.
anyhow.
Well, that's all we're talking
The
about
net
anyway,
difference
is one
can't be that
vehicle,
much.
right?
Yeah,
It's
one
just
vehicle.
shared,
Yeah.
I've gone back and forth in my thinking here,
okay.
yeah.
Can you get enough out of the 2 out there to make up for 1 year's lease?
Take the part of
All I
one,
know is
use the good of each.
Yeah, I think we all agree that paying $4,000 for the exhaust, I mean, to continue to try to
On that
repair
particular
the old
car.
existing car
Well,
doesn't sound
I mean, that isn't totally an outrageous number when you talk about catalytic converters that are probably
Oh, yeah.
$1,400 apiece. So,
If it was
Yeah.
a really nice car, I'd say, sure, go for it, but that's just my personal observation.
I mean, I think the root of this is just that we still get down to, it seems like we continue to add vehicles, like Mark was saying, and add infrastructure, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, realistically, what's 10 grand in the grand scheme of this budget?
Right.
Jack shit, you know, so you've gotta wonder where it's a mentality thing and of, oh, we need another vehicle. And
Yeah.
I know it's just a vehicle, but it's still we need X.
A fleet.
Let's, yeah, I mean,
I'd rather not
budget.
have a single car. I'd rather not have any of it. It's all headaches to me. I mean, honestly, the moment we took the car over, I don't know if I grumbled to you yet, but I was like, this is such a pain.
I heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Clay, it's more headaches for me, and it's more headaches for the staff. The staff are grumbling. They preferred having mileage because when it needed, they could submit for it. But it was, it was a decision the board made, and the idea was that it would save money in the end.
Did it?
Until the repair costs come in, I don't
So
think we could.
the answer to that would be yes.
Well, it
Maintenance
did.
Maintenance is something you gotta do anyway.
Right, but new versus old, all that. I guess the question is, we all go through this. At some point, we all do this with stuff we have. Is it worth putting more money into this thing, or do I sell it and get something new? Do I, that's, and at what point, it's all, each of us is individual,
Right. And here we have the option where we don't have to own a vehicle.
Right,
As a
right,
town.
if that's and if you guys tell me what you
Yeah,
want
I'm
to
just-
be, we'll do it.
But you
know?
still have to at the end.
The difference is, I don't ask you to pay for it
Yeah.
when I'm requesting my stuff.
No, but I have to decide what's the right expense for our budget. And so, in a way, I have to be mindful of the same thing you guys were saying, which is, if I spend it on this, I don't have it to fix this other thing over here. And that's the priority thing that, if we don't do it, we don't have a budget for mileage, so I can't just leave it sitting rotting in the parking lot.
So-
We have to have an answer, and
How
that's,
typical is it for towns to provide vehicles for something like this?
oh, very common.
Okay.
I used to go to all, and they're all old police cruisers, and they all walk around acting like they're police officers, and none of the code officers are.
And Don Willard still drives one today, so.
Is he really?
Oh, you
All right,
did the
well, we
last
probably
time.
beat this one to,
Well, I guess to echo with Clay, I mean, when you're talking
Yeah.
about a 20-some-odd million dollar budget, and we're trying to nickel and dime over a $10,000 car, somebody has to be that lightning rod to say, hey, makes it easier on you guys, because we'll bring it up and you will, that budget committee is pretty right.
yeah.
Maybe we
No, I
will.
appreciate the good thoughts into this.
I want one other question to belabor the point a little bit more, is what's the general perception of the employees in town?
Yeah.
You just mentioned a minute ago that
Yeah.
most employees would prefer to drive their own cars. I'm just wondering what the acceptance would, if a change was made, to
Well-
go back to mileage.
Everyone hates change, first off, right? So there's that part of it. But secondly, I think when the change happened, I think there was grumbling that I heard of, well, I'd rather drive my own vehicle and charge mileage back. I think there were employees that didn't charge mileage and probably should have for a long time, and whatever costs or non-costs we should have been carrying, we didn't, but that's their choice. I think that we've adapted to the role we have. Orion and Scott use that car more than most. The complaint I hear
We
about
do
is,
a prayer every time we drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to use it as much as we can.
yeah, I think the issue I hear about most of all is, I can't go down that road in that car, so I gotta take my car.
On that particular.
And that's where it's not the right vehicle for what we have.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of this, is that whatever we're gonna replace whatever with at some point, it needs to be something that's a little higher off the ground and can get where you need to go.
All-wheel drive and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question about so we've lost the assistant. There was a request to have a part-time additional code enforcement officer. Is there any way to play with that? I mean, is an assistant what we really need, or is there some?
Why don't you start and I'll finish?
Yes.
Is it possible to get one?
Well, I mean, there is, and John and I talked about it today. We're gonna not deconstruct, but really look at the position and what it entails. And with the office remodel to come, like, how's that really gonna work in our office? Because they're not gonna be in that same location where it's traffic all around them anymore. So they're gonna have their own area, potentially their own window, and then it's gonna operate a little differently at that point. So is that something we should put out and hire somebody immediately? Probably not. I think John and I should really think about the best avenue of what that position's gonna entail before we do that. So pushing that back a little bit, giving us some time, so that'll build that up a little bit. And then we'll have a little bit of reserve, I guess, that could potentially go towards maybe something
And that
towards,
person
it
could
won't be what
perhaps
I've
take some of
proposed.
the workload off of Scott? Is there a way to? I mean,
Are you
not be the
talking
one-
about merging both of those positions into something, or?
Well,
are
I'm
you
just
saying-
wondering how much of what Scott's doing is more than, in addition to going out and doing the plumbing inspections or doing
Yes.
the.
There's a number of items that he and I have identified that he doesn't really need to spend his time on. So having an alternate code enforcement officer of some varying degree would alleviate a lot of his time. That is just a, yeah, you check all the boxes, you're good to go kind of thing. And then he can spend some time enforcing the ordinance. Now, is that a joint? Is that an assistant
Right, does that
slash
somehow build
something?
into the-
I've thought about it. I've pitched it to John, and he's not quite sure what does that mean, because if it's someone that, you know, they need to be readily available to handle anybody that walks up, they can't really stop their permitting process just to help them along their way. So there's a lot that we're talking about and thinking through.
Okay. Well, this budget then includes the assistant, which could be some different kind of job description at the end of the day.
That's right.
So is that part, I mean, planning and community development, it's 247 being proposed up from 230, is that the 17,000 for the assistant?
Those are, so there's, what is that, the step? That's the
Yeah.
increase of the step.
Yeah, it's everyone's status quo.
It's the 3 positions that are there already.
Yeah, nothing changed.
The 288 would be the addition of the alternate code
Yep.
officer.
And it went down to 247 without
All
that,
right.
so
Right.
230 to
Well,
247.
I was there again thinking, if you haven't got your hole in the wall built yet, and it's gonna take a few months, maybe we can do like the fire and put it off hiring it for a few months, which,
Well, we might end up with a month or two of,
yeah,
at
yeah.
least for this last year.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, perhaps. The issue that I have is, I don't know the skill sets, how the skill sets fit. Is it one person? Is it 2 people? That availability in how the office works, it's really important when somebody comes in. The clerks can't answer a lot of those questions. Like, if you go in and you see Wendy or Shay, and they say, you know, I gotta build a garage, they go like, well, Scott's not in, or Scott's got somebody in, and I can't really help you. This person should be able, okay, here's the permit form, this is what you need to do, this is, and while we could give that to Wendy and Shay to do, that's just a very inefficient way of operating, right? So, we were talking today, it's like, what's this person, what's this position, what's the value of that department? And it's really in trying to take all of us through that process of getting a permit to do something, or taking us all through that process of getting to Scott and getting a complaint filed, or whatever it might be. Like, they're working through that. The other thing is that there's a community development aspect to that department, right? And outreach and communicating, right? There's a part of this that's a very reactive pose of us sort of, you come to me and tell me what you need and I'll help you, right? There is so much going on in that office, in our town, that people don't know about. And we talk about in our newsletters every 4 months or 3 months or whatever it is, and people still don't know what's going on. Somehow, we need to break the logjam with talking with our residents and tell them what's happening. Tell them what's going on. Tell them the issues that we're facing. Because right now, I don't know that people know what's happening. There's probably, how many people watching right now, Jeff?
We got 7.
Yeah, right, okay. So, you know, I mean,
Thank you,
and,
Seven.
and, you know, and Dan will write an article about what we've been talking about for Village Soup, and Linda will write something maybe about, you know, in Pilot, and the vast majority of people might read it, might not read it, but they don't know what's going on. It used to be back in the olden days, right, where you'd read, and there were 2 or 3 articles every week in the Camden Herald about what the select board was doing, or what this department was doing, or Public Works was doing that, or the PD, or whatever it might have been. People don't know what's going on.
Well, we have the resource,
We have the resource,
and I
that's
think
right.
that people do read it.
I think so. Can we do better? Can we do more on social? Can we do more, like?
Yeah.
So,
We just hire someone else for that.
no,
With a car.
we're gonna put a big speaker on top of the new car, Claire. And we're gonna say, it's like the Blues Brothers. We're
Yes.
gonna tell everybody what's happening.
Drive around town.
I think we got the position in here. I think it's a question, can we use it to a better degree than we have? But we'll see, we'll see.
Well, that's sort of, because I noticed we had this $5,000 for advertising. And it says advertising and marketing is needed to assist in the economic growth of the community.
What is that?
Yeah, those two aren't related.
That is 3805.
That was part of the budget, not part of what we were just talking about.
Well, I'm looking at page 134, and it's the
Yeah, it's,
explanation of 3805. So I just was curious, what kind of advertising we would do that would assist in the economic growth of the community.
What are we advertising?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, we don't have anything that really promotes our local businesses. We don't have much of anything really that promotes our local businesses. We've got a brand new hotel, and that's, I mean, their job, they're promoting it, but from a town standpoint, when I'm out talking to people, most people, because I don't live in Rockport, they don't know where Rockport is. They don't know that it's in between Rockland and Camden, and it's too many people that don't know that. And I'm not saying let's, put a star on the map and everybody drive to Rockport, but it would be easier to have something to easily market our local economy to help promote it if someone's interested in driving up. 5,000, that's a small number for advertising and marketing, but it's enough to put some informational bit together that's easy for my department to easily hand out, whether that's on a website or some PDF that's made, it's easy to share electronically, but that's what that is.
Isn't that something that the chamber does? I mean, I understand you
Jewel
want
and
to
Main
focus
Coast.
totally on Rockport, but
Yeah.
don't they do that now? I
Yeah,
mean,
they have
The
I
Jewel,
was reading their book they put together. It was
the
a-
Jewel of the Main Coast,
Yeah.
yeah.
maybe it's something just
It
contacting
doesn't
them.
it's showcase Rockport.
Maybe it's
in a
just
way.
about contacting them and saying, could you please showcase more on your monthly, weekly, quarterly newsprint?
So,
Get members.
I was on the board for the chamber for years, and the Jewel is designed for businesses that pay membership to.
Yeah.
So if there's Rockport businesses don't pay into the chamber, then the chamber's not gonna advertise for this.
And you don't get your flyers in the chamber if you're not a member.
I-
So, I mean,
Yeah.
this would
Yeah.
fill a void for those that aren't in the chamber.
I guess I'd want to, I mean, I do see that it was, last year it was budgeted at 2,400 and we spent 3,100 so far. So what was that $3,100?
Was it like donut festival and all that stuff advertising? Is that stuff?
Some of that
kind
was
of
in there. I would have to, Megan, I don't know if you have that exploded, but
It's really expensive to post job postings, and
that
that
does
one.
stuff.
That's what I was thinking it had to do with when I saw here, but then when I read this explanation, it was like, it just seemed vague to me. Advertising and marketing is needed to assist in the economic growth of the communities. It was a surprise to, I didn't know that, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and we do want to support our local businesses. I don't know if it's our job to advertise for them.
I see, okay, putting it in advertising. I didn't create a marketing line item. I was tucking it into advertising.
I looked at it as we'd spent $3,100 year to date, and I said,
Yeah, that's why it didn't
I don't
catch
know
my
that we're gonna
attention
spend
over
less.
here. Yeah,
And the other thing that, planning board, when the planning board holds public hearings, there's also advertising that goes with that as well.
that's what I totally thought
So
it
when
was.
you're-
But then this explanation was
Those
just,
types are all
Covered.
wrapped.
Right, but the difference between 2,400 and 5,000, a doubling of, there's a year-to-date number, but there's also a doubling of what was expected last year, and so I looked at that as, the
Right.
explanation is the differential between those two. You never know what's going to come up. I mean, you could have lawsuits and you could have ZBA meetings.
Yeah, no, I get it in
So
terms of
there
legal
is sort of
notices
a
and all that, that's
moving
just
target.
That's what
business
this
as usual.
is legal notices, public hearings.
So this explanation
employment.
isn't really what we meant to say in that.
I'm just telling you what the 3100 is. The department head wrote the explanation.
But as someone who has spent their life in marketing, there is a big difference in the town marketing themselves as a destination, as a, you know, short-term, short distance, long distance stuff. And it would be just like saying, oh, the Opera House should do fine, you know, by just all the other press that the area gets. No, it can't. You know, the Opera House has to do their own marketing. The town has to do their own marketing. And if we do something really bold that is unusual, you know, we get that word out.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good idea, it just seemed like an odd way to come in at this issue. If what we think we need to do is market Rockport, that seems like a different discussion, and I'd love to.
How many businesses are there that you would be helping?
As many as I can.
Well, no kidding. I mean,
Obviously.
5,000, 500,
No, there's not
100? I mean,
No, there's not
where,
5,000.
what,
I don't have that exact
the
number.
bang for the buck? I mean,
I haven't had any money to do any of that right now, so I couldn't answer your question on how many people are really interested in it. This right here gives me a little bit of money based on just the difference of what I've already spent. I'm only halfway through the year on what I could do.
And that wasn't necessarily for business in total as much as it was for Rockport itself.
Yeah,
So that's where I guess,
I just suggest at this point we stay, well,
Well, I'm just thinking, like, part of the marketing I envision is you're also promoting things like, we're so old in this area, like families.
Speak for yourself,
We have a
John
beautiful
Alden.
school district, you know, I mean, so many different things to help entice people to want to live and pay taxes to us.
I guess if we're gonna spend money on that, I'd like to see a proposal and some understanding of really what we're trying to accomplish. And keep this, maybe 5,000 is the right number, because we've already spent 3,100, and if we're gonna
and
have
if we,
planning board legal notices.
and if we do a good enough job, then maybe the ones that are now paying the chamber, maybe they'll come on
There you
board
go.
and, you know, we can lure people away.
Yeah.
You know, don't know.
Yeah.
But we need a fair amount just for the normal legal notices and all that stuff,
Right.
right?
That's what, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
the explanation under
Yeah, it was
3805
confusing, yeah.
isn't exactly what we're voting for.
Yeah.
Okay.
My recommendation is to stay with the proposed, what I proposed. If you want to go different, but I, just in terms of what we've spent and what we are going to spend,
It looks like we're
Five-
gonna be hitting 5,000 just
Five's
because
the
it's
number,
expensive to do. But these are
Yeah.
legal notices, these are the things that are just
Right.
necessary as part of how we run our business.
right. And as they go up, I mean, that's also part of what we talk about the fees, right? A couple of years ago, last year, 2 years ago, we talked about increasing the fees and looking at the fee schedule. As those, you know, costs go up, then the cost.
Right, we should be charging enough.
Right,
Offset.
offset,
Yep.
exactly, so.
And Ryan, maybe the Economic Development Committee, I'm not trying to put the kibosh on this sort of idea.
no, I
But I
understand.
think it just needs to be more thought out.
Sure. And I mean, they are working on their economic strategic plan, so that can lead into some other thing. And there is, I mean, we can talk to some marketing firms, get an idea of a marketing plan and go from there, get some estimates on what that would cost.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep, not for this budget year, but. yeah.
And then legal fees, is that, we budgeted 10 in that?
Yeah,
Is that enough?
Well,
Dartboard toss.
yeah.
Anything on the horizon?
No, nothing's on the horizon, and that's in part due to high interest rates right now. I have been having some conversations of some developers coming in, but given the climate of what the community wants, I don't think it's gonna be anything controversial. However, I don't know what the neighbor is gonna say, so we'll see. Is 10,000 enough? I'm not sure. However, I will say, over the past year and a half to 2 years, what we've been doing with the planning board is getting their findings of facts and conclusions of law very airtight, so that if there is ever an appeal, it can be handled in a time-efficient manner. A lot of the items with the longer, more expensive appeal was due to gaps and issues of not a structured findings of facts and conclusions of law.
So, I mean, even if it goes beyond the 10,000, I mean, Jonathan has a contingency fund.
Sure.
Yeah, that could help offset it. I mean, whatever you've got in that.
Right.
600, 700 now?
Oh, no. Shh, I still have to use, but, no, you're right, and if you overspend the line, it's in the, in the warrant, in the charter, frankly, we can overspend for that purpose and take it out of fund balance, but, that's,
I mean,
you'd
last
like to
year-
budget and pay for it,
Last year, we spent $225 out of the 25,000 budgeted, so.
Let's keep that
seems like a
going.
good-
And 80,000 a couple years before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Moving right along.
And that's all we're gonna say about that.
That's
Yep.
right.
I like the smaller numbers.
Anything else for Ryan? Ryan, anything?
No, I'm good, thank you. Anything?
Not here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
107.
Thank you. All right, John, administration, 107.
Not a lot here to write home about.
That was awesome.
Bang it in.
I know.
I want more snacks. Oh, my God.
I know, right? Still that picture from?
Jeez, what an ugly picture.
Facebook somewhere, I don't know.
Probably.
I had to get creative.
That was a chamber event.
I tried to find.
Oh, it's a nice
I
look.
look like I'm not gonna say
That's
what I
my
look like.
pumpkin
I really
earrings.
do.
Yours didn't get pinched like Jim's and Eric's did.
That's a Microsoft thing.
Well, that's,
That's when pictures have been going through the email and they.
mine gets spread out, makes me look
I gotta
fatter.
change scarves, I'm not wearing that scarf again.
That's-
we're suing Apple for being good.
I'm gonna
Maybe it's not here.
redo
Too
that
good,
one.
yeah.
Wastewater?
That's ugly.
All right, anybody have anything to
The
Well,
reimbursement.
comment
yes,
about
I
this?
was just getting ready to ask a question, surprise.
You are, okay.
Looks
So,
like I'm ready to.
I'm looking at revenues down there, where it's wastewater stipend, wastewater audit, miscellaneous donations. Where is it listed about the revenue received for the Route 1? When does that kick in for the payment of the stub fees?
Oh, in the wastewater budget, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, what's,
Wastewater stuff doesn't show up in this budget, except for the reimbursements from wastewater to the general fund.
all right.
For employees, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just saw revenues from stipend reimbursement, wastewater.
So the wastewater is, budget is funding in part the select board stipends,
Yeah.
That's right.
as well as for the town audit.
Correct.
Oh, that was quick.
Okay. Any questions? Next is town manager, 113.
Largely status quo. The only change here, this was the contingency number that you mentioned, Mark. I've not used it this year, which is the first year that it hadn't come up. The first year was used to fund the collapse of the sewer line at the town office. The second year it funded.
The air conditioner.
Yep. So the third year I'm waiting for catastrophe to strike and it hasn't yet. It will.
matter of
I know it will. We just know it will.
still got it,
Maybe maybe that's where I'll pay for the
Sealing
things.
of the brick.
Sealing the brick, sure, yeah, or, I have
Get
to,
us some length on that sidewalk.
maybe I can put the 8 inches back, just lay it out right there, write my
the
name
town
on it.
office.
John was here. It just doesn't, so if you're gonna get some sort of study or some sort of $10,000 doesn't buy a whole lot. So that was why I increased it to 20, because 20 actually would allow us to, this is where, if we had to add, you know, we find out there's black mold in the public safety building, or, not the public safety building, the public works building, I've got money here that I could throw at that, which would be outside the norm. That's really what the contingency is. It's meant to be the things that we haven't even thought of, that all of a sudden show up on our doorstep. And my sense was $10,000 doesn't fix any of that. So, that's why it increased here. But, and like I said, the last few years we've used it, and I fully expect
I mean-
something's gonna break tomorrow.
With everything that you are aware of at the public safety building now,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even, you wait and get the big ball of wax.
Yeah.
Rather than spending something that's
No.
minuscule now, and it's just.
Yep. I totally agree with you. I was just using that as an example, but you're right. We need to know
I
the
listen
whole
to
knot.
every word.
That's scary.
I may not remember it all, so.
What are we hoping to accomplish by hiring an HR consultant?
Well, that's a good question. We have had,
It's a good idea. Yeah,
It's a great idea.
It's been really,
we've been in the mix.
Well,
We've
cover
been in
our
the mix. We've had between 2 unions, and just managing our own staff. We brought somebody that I'm paying for out of my legal budget, to bring them on to help us deal with, a disciplinary action against 2 employees in one department, and 2 other issues with other employees, non-union, as well, and that was in 6 weeks. So, it's, I don't wanna say it's CYA time,
But it
but
is.
we have to do it.
But as someone that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all they.
That was
that's-
my suggestion, because the problem comes along is, he doesn't know HR. HR is its own animal, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
hate HR. So,
It's-
I said,
yeah.
we need somebody that knows the laws, knows the information, is part of the HR national group, that can get the information that we need, that can do these things that are strictly HR, help us write policies, help us with job descriptions, handle employee problems, give the employee someone to go to if there's a problem at the management side.
Right.
It's not something that we can do in-house, and it's not a full-time job.
Right.
So I said, he needs to find somebody that he can hire that can do this and provide us with the support, so that he's not running himself into a circle that's gonna get us in trouble with labor laws and unions. It's not something we should be doing in-house. It needs to be an outside source.
The 15 is cheap if there's a lawsuit
Yeah.
and someone files a
At least we
complaint.
didn't call him a communications director. It's a side story.
Yeah, it's just HR is too bad of an animal that we shouldn't have. We don't need a full-time person, but we need that expertise, because we have too many people to not have it.
and it doesn't help to go to, we have employment lawyers, but as we
Right.
found, they just don't,
Yeah,
They haven't
they're
done
not
all that.
necessarily HR people. They
No.
just know the law, but they don't know how to deal with the people.
Yeah.
And my hope is to avoid, this was, not adding positions, right? This is where you can add expertise without adding positions, and do that as long as you possibly can to avoid that, so.
Yeah, we were definitely running into issues where I felt none of us were able to deal with these
and
problems.
I think it lets us make the hard decisions sooner than we have in the past.
Yep, absolutely.
If you've been paying for it out of legal, would
Yeah.
legal not come down?
So, yeah, legal, will be over budget in legal because of the fact that we are paying out of that legal. So we'll be over budget in my budget, we'll be over. But it's we're not using the full extent of the services that we will beginning July 1. So I'm trying to just use her where we need her right now. And then, you know, once we sort of are into July, it will be
So,
Because your expenses for the half are, 15.9, which is only half of your budget, so
yeah,
that's why I wanted to know if
That's
they
a-
could come down.
That's a fixed price
yeah.
contract.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think that's probably just timing of their billing is why that's not quite 50,
Oh, is
I
the
think.
so what,
the retainer fee or whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
for Bernstein, yeah.
so when is that contract due to be renewed?
It's annual.
Yeah,
That's right.
I don't know that there's a time,
Well, I thought, well,
but,
I think there used to be a period where, and I only ask because, I mean, we're paying extra for stuff that we didn't, somewhere we negotiated an agreement with them.
right.
So maybe we broaden the scope of what we negotiate so that we don't have to pay extra. And you just got one line rather than,
Well, the HR is different, right?
I'm
You don't mean
I'm
that.
talking about legal for,
The only concern I would have is we might want to wait a year or two more when all the litigation is in the past. And they aren't looking at their recently billed numbers, when they come up with that new
well, and-
number.
right. And that's
You know
one
what I
of the-
mean?
That's one of the conversations we had years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think Bernstein does a fine job for us. I mean, they're sort of one size fits all. You call and they can offer whatever we want from them. The issues are, they have conflicts because they represent everybody in the state of Maine at one time or another. And they are, they're very big. So there's benefits and there's cons to that. But that's, they're responsive and, I think we've gotten good advice from them on the whole. There's times when I haven't really liked the advice we've gotten from them. Not because I disagree with it, because I don't think it was right, but, hey, we're all people.
Are there any considerations for changing that?
Well, I think that's what Mark's sort of suggesting is that, at what
Or just-
point do you want to go back out and go to bid for it? I don't know, what time, how long ago was that? Was that?
I mean,
5, 6
I
years?
think we talked about it when Deborah was there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's been 5 years ago, maybe.
I think Rick was still here when we did it.
Well, that's 8 years ago then.
Yeah, you may,
I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
just go away from the firm, but we're paying extra because they have to farm it out somewhere else, because they can't do it because of a conflict. So if you look at what we're paying for now and you make that umbrella just a little bit bigger,
Yep.
there'll probably always be the conflicts. I don't know that you can.
Yeah. The
I think
conflict.
this was the only firm willing to offer us a, flat rate fee for the majority of our legal services when we went through this before. Most other ones wanted to charge us by the hour, and that's where we were getting into, budget overrun issues, or some departments with really high legal expenses, and then some departments using it as the town manager instead of working through other channels. And I think this really cut down on inappropriate use or misuse of legal services.
If I remember correctly, Rockport was one of the very first towns that they worked with in order to investigate that whole concept of flat fee. And it seems like it's been working out.
Yeah, and I think they usually come back to us and say, okay, this is what it actually cost us, and this is what you paid, and that's close, so we're good to go forward, or we need an adjustment.
The last couple of years, they haven't increased the rate, so.
Yeah.
And in my
You know
experience,
they're
they've
doing
always
good
had
then.
the expertise we've needed too.
well, here we are almost at the end, John.
Almost. What's next up?
All right,
You?
139, finance. Well, congratulations on the award again.
Wait, what award?
What? Huh?
Distinguished budget president. Well,
Oh,
So just about every year
Oh,
running,
that, okay.
Megan's like, she's like, I don't even know. It's like the Patriots, but way better. She wins the Distinguished Budget Award every year. it's kind of like a nothing burger now at this point because
They're
she
like,
just wins all the time.
Rockport.
She's at the
She's
upper
just-
echelon
right.
already.
We're gonna do a whole
Even
like
I'm-
documentary about how she kills it every year making the budget document. So, but yeah, so that's. But you know, this is the budget's important. The budget's it's your opportunity to talk about all the values like we're talking about tonight. Of okay, at what point do you stop hiring people? What point do you need equipment? What point do you value your infrastructure? And the methods. Some of our department heads take it more seriously than others. I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, but there are ways when you read through this, there's a lot you can learn about what each department's doing and how they're providing value, right? That's the method because she's the one who puts it together for them in a way that, you know, sort of lay out what is it you're providing for service and what's the value for that for the average taxpayer. And it's a really valuable thing. It's a monster document, and I've had back problems the last 2 weeks carrying this in my backpack here, but you know, it's.
Talk to the HR person.
I gotta talk to the HR person about it. Yeah, I need accommodation for it.
I think it's good that you did put that in here. It should be out so the public knows how good we are.
We have an award-winning
With our-
finance director, multi-time.
It should help give confidence
It
to
should,
people in the town.
absolutely. It's,
I have to admit, when I saw that, I was like, whoa.
yeah, absolutely.
It
We'll just keep
reinforced
talking
what-
about how good you are.
Yeah,
We'll talk about your budget.
Yes, it reinforced.
So
what
Megan's
I had already
awesome.
told
Could we like
people
talk about
you.
the Excel spreadsheet now? Well, anyway, well, it's nice to have interest rates go up, that's.
Yes.
Yeah, talk about some good news.
I think that potentially this is a place that you could add more money in terms of expected revenue. My only concern is that interest rates do drop off. And if they rapidly drop off, like they
Yeah,
rapidly
And the Fed
increase.
just announced there's gonna be some,
3 cuts this year.
yeah.
Right, so it makes
Like
me
0.5%.
apprehensive to,
Yeah, probably 3 half cuts.
that's why I
Because
landed
you
where
made
I
one
landed.
sixty, year to date is 160,
Yeah.
wow.
Um,
Does that mean it's gonna be like 320?
Yeah. It's a lot.
And it was only
Our
expected
bank
to be
treats us very
50?
well.
We get the sidewalk after
And it
all.
was only expected to be 50?
No,
No.
we get that, data
Oh,
sound or
or both.
whatever, yeah,
Okay, yeah,
It's
yeah,
Christmas.
yeah.
2 more
So you
streets,
Or we
do
get
get-
the reserve account,
2 more streets paved.
yeah.
I mean, it's a potentially
Maybe a culvert
place
plan for next
You
year.
could have,
that you could increase. My only apprehension is if you increase it too much and then the rates drop.
but you could increase it even if you went to 160.
You could.
You'd be at just what, half a year? Because they'll come down, I don't know,
Should be 1.5 basis point cuts.
1/2, so 1.5% down.
And we're at 4?
It's nice to have a revenue
Five,
higher than
almost five.
anticipated.
Almost 5. So we'd be at 3.5 if we did that, which,
There's still, I mean,
That's
that's
still,
where we were pre-COVID.
yeah.
I mean, it would match with the 155 2 years ago. Were we at 3.5?
No, pre-COVID, so it would have been whatever was before the 15,867.
So,
So we could go,
yeah, well, we're only 60,000 difference, let's add some to it.
175.
so would 200,000 be reasonable if we were at, I mean, 3.5% for the year, so 5. I can't do the math fast enough
I guess it depends on when they do the reductions.
Mhm.
Probably May.
to, May will be
Be
the
the
first.
So that
Because
would be
housing's fallen off and job unemployment's
this
climbing.
May, like 2 months, May.
So,
And that's
you
not
know,
even.
they always run in, they're always behind the game, so I'd expect the May meeting, they'll probably cut a quarter to a half.
So then presume the bank will make an adjustment
Yeah,
either
that
May
next
or
morning.
June, right?
That afternoon, you'll get your email.
So then we'll be down some in June, and then if they're gonna make 2 more adjustments, I mean, you got 6 months to split 2 adjustments over.
Well, I think we could go up from 120.
You put 150 to 170 probably without too much problem. But, I don't know, do you have any amortization schedules that you could plug the balance at 3.5 and see what it works out to?
I mean, I could do that.
Give us a, you know, take your average balance and we'll do a 3.5% rate for the year and we'll plug that number.
I mean, if you're talking about 161 over 6 months, I think of what you said, I mean, it wouldn't, you could say 161 instead of 120.
Yeah.
And you're still gonna be safe, because,
Yeah, I
well, you
think so
should be
too.
still safe.
Yeah.
So my question is, while Megan's doing her math, so the McCog, the McCog reimbursement, I know, Megan, you get down there and work. How many days a week, times a month, times a year? Is it 1 day a month?
It's 1 day every other week, so
2 days.
sometimes it's 2 times a month, sometimes it's 3 times a month, depending on how the weeks fall.
And where I'm going with that is, I know we're getting reimbursed, but you've got a lot of balls that you juggle and you do it well. But how much better could it be done if you were here those extra 2 days a week? And McCog goes and hires their own person. I don't know, just a thought.
I don't know, that looks like a pretty good reimbursement.
Well, it is, but I mean, you know,
They're getting a raise,
you've got 16 hours a month that they're not here.
Yeah.
Because they're working down there, so the workload then, those 16 hours a month gets added on somewhere else on her plate. So her days become more full because of her not being here.
I can tell you the days that I'm
So it's 10%.
not there, I am still working on stuff for Rockport.
Well, that's 10% of the time.
Right.
So 160 hours a month, you only put 16 for them. That's 10%, and we do not pay you 222.
No, they reimburse, wage,
And
benefits, taxes, mileage,
Yeah.
so.
Do you like doing it? What is MCOG? Is it main?
Midcoast Council of Governments, and they
Council.
service basically from Brunswick area to Bremen for planning services.
It's a good outfit.
Belfast.
Yeah. If they could get
Isn't Bremen
past
past
we
Belfast?
need to do something.
Oh, then they're up even further, like Sears, Ford.
Wait, aren't you our representative on that?
Yeah.
Oh. How's that going?
Yeah, we need to do something. Obviously, we need to do something. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe someday.
Put it on next month's schedule, we'll get to it.
So Megan, you can get us the amortization on the,
I just did some quick math. I think 170 will be okay. I mean,
Okay.
we'll have big tax collections in April and then again in October. So
So we'll have-
assuming they make their final adjustment like November, December, more towards the end of the year, I mean, I can't imagine that they'd make it like 1 month, wait a month, and then make it
No,
another adjustment.
It's gonna be.
So if they
they're
wait
gonna
till
space it
December,
out.
then you're gonna be,
we'll be fine.
right.
Okay.
What does that change that to if you,
So from 120 to 170.
My budget is a net negative 110,000. So.
Pretty good for the best finance director in the state.
40,000.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there more?
Any other?
That's it. That's
Okay.
all of them.
Woo!
So, what's next?
Meeting tomorrow.
So tomorrow,
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
so what's gonna happen, so tomorrow, the budget committee will vote on recommendations that will go on the warrant.
And so just to be clear, those
Yeah.
votes, we need 5 people,
All in favor?
all in favor. Wow, we might have 6 here tomorrow.
Yeah, whichever, yeah.
to be
But-
in favor of it, to
Yeah.
make it an official recommendation to the
Yeah.
board.
Right, so you need a quorum's worth
And-
in
We've
favor.
got Jeff's vote
And
up
we
there.
vote on the whole budget as a whole, or do we vote on parts of it?
So my recommendation as someone who will probably have to take what you did and put it into a format that people can understand on the warrant, is to take individual items and dollar amounts and use those as your recommendations. So for example, and I think this is a good one, was last year, the vote you all had on the assessing, adding that to do the tax maps. So that was a very clear recommendation. Budget committee recommends for adding $5,000 to assessing. Real clear what it said, easy to put it on a warrant, no problem. If there's a recommendation, if 5 of you say, we think the town manager's crazy, and that's probably gonna be difficult to put on a warrant, as accurate as it might be. But, the real trick is just try to, I think, as condensed and as simple to explain as they can be, dollar amounts, departments, they really have to be identified in such a way so that when the board approves their warrant on the 8th, they can, well, first of all, on the 8th, it's easy to identify the warrant, but secondly, that the recommendations you all have, they're gonna then consider at their meeting on April 1st.
Right.
When they make the final changes to the budget. So like last year, it said, the select board, agree, budget committee recommend, I can't remember what it said, but something like budget committee recommend 5,000 division, to assessing, select board accepted change or something to that nature. So it's sort of like winnows down the budget to a place of like, okay, now that's in the budget committee section, here are the 5 things we're recommending, then those go to the board. They could make more changes to the budget than that, but you've heard the whole sort of line by line, what are the things that the group of you want to do? That's really what the process.
So if they're making those changes, are our recommendations still showing up on that?
Yep. Yeah, so your recommendations are sort of, that's your work. And after tomorrow night, effectively, in terms of the work product, what you have to complete, you're done.
So you're gonna, again, this year, which was different than the year previous, right?
Yeah.
Separate it so that the vote, how should I say it? You basically put all of the expenditures in one
Yeah,
section of the warrant. and said,
administration, whatever, yeah, yep.
What the select vote voted for, against, abstained.
Yeah, they'll have they'll have one article and they'll have one recommendation on the whole article. So they'll, budget, select board recommends, whatever, 3-2,
Yeah.
well, 3-1, or 2-2, or whatever it is. And then above that would be your recommendation. So budget committee recommends, and probably what we'd do, if we had a couple, probably we'd create like maybe a table or something, so it's sort of, it's hard to know until it happens in a way, but I'm trying to figure out the best way to sort of make it easy for people to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of my
Specifically what you
question
guys wanna
also
do.
was, because last year, granted, some of it was a process issue, but
It was, yeah.
last year, we ended up so that on the expenditure section of the budget
Yeah,
vote,
yeah,
we never displayed on there anywhere what the budget committee.
right, because that's not what's in the charter. So the charter says you make comments, recommendations on the budget. It doesn't say you recommend it overall. So the idea is you're recommending changes, whether it's you like it, you don't like it, to the board
Yeah, right.
and to the public at large. So that's why the way the phrasing of saying select board agree or disagree, let's say, for example, to use the assessing idea, you guys recommend 5,000, they say no. Select board doesn't, include it in their budget. The rest of the town thinks it's crazy, these guys don't know what they're talking about. The idea is that warrant article should read as such, so that then the voters know, you went through the whole budget process, you think this should happen, they think it shouldn't, then the voters make the decision about well, okay, well, that's a good thing or a bad thing. And that's sort of the idea of it, rather than the overall of, budget committee recommends, 3-2, and select board recommends, 4-1. That's not the way our charter reads. The way our charter reads is a more specific role for you guys. Which
Well,
could be good
I
and could be
can't
bad.
visualize this at all.
What's that?
I cannot visualize this at all.
What the warrant looks like with the recommendations.
Here, I'll
But
show
you
you
got-
what
you guys
last
have to-
year's warrant
Yeah, she
looked
can
like.
show you.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'm
Because
trying
it's
to
always
see, like,
been there.
You guys have to
Every
like
time
line
we
item
voted, John.
approve or department approve or,
Everything we've talked about
that's
in
why I'm so
all of these
confused the way he's,
meetings, did any of these
Yeah.
numbers change?
or, and is it
Or is,
changes
I
from
mean, is
last
this
year?
Yeah.
book
Or
still
changes to what's
correct?
proposed?
Or were
gonna
things
show us
changed
warrant.
that
Okay.
Yeah.
I should have written down in my book, but I was lax?
Yeah, there were a handful of things, and I couldn't tell you specifically what they were.
Megan can,
But you
But-
guys still get to change them too.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, we'll,
Yeah.
we'll hear, I mean, this is great, because we'll get the input from you all, and then we'll evaluate that, and,
So at the bottom
might have
of the
our own,
budget
too.
article, sorry.
So-
At the bottom of the budget article, it had, the budget committee's
Sorry.
recommendation was to add $5,000 to the assessing.
Select board
It
approved.
should say assessing budget, but, and then the select board approved that addition.
But
Does that make sense?
above that, all those line items, is that everything?
These are all the
All the departments.
Each of the departments.
appropriations, so the expenses for
For
the
each
year.
department?
Yep.
Okay, okay.
So do we get new pages? I
And
missed
I
my
mean,
answer.
last year, there was a lot of frustration because I think some of it was just because of the process of going
It was
back and forth
confusing.
and back and forth, and some of it was
Yeah.
because even though it doesn't show up there anywhere, as a budget committee, the majority of the budget committee voted against the budget,
Right.
against the expenditures. But then all we had for a recommendation was that one recommendation, because we had 6 people show up to the meeting. So you had to have 5 to make it enough to even make it a recommendation, which meant you had to have 5 out of the 6 agree on it. So some of it is a numbers issue where we don't even have enough people to agree. Some of it is we don't even have enough people.
Right.
So that is why
Jeff will be here tomorrow night,
also
right?
a process issue of,
Yeah.
we unfortunately just don't have the numbers again this year.
Members in,
In
so
the
that's
people
where
aren't-
their vacancies.
people aren't running for the-
Okay,
I
now
mean, what do we have, 4 open spots now, 3 open spots now? Started with 2 and then 1 resigned or whatever, the right word
And
is.
then there's 3 of you that
Are we still on right now? Are we still live?
I think we're public.
So, I mean, my only comment's gonna be, when I look at the highway foreman's remarks about additional roads that should be paved, but we can't afford them.
Which page
And that,
are you on?
that's 242. And that's that block of 9 roads that should be done. And it totals 851,000 in total. So to me, I mean, I'm wearing many hats, prior hats, current hats, but to me, you've got $851,000 worth of stuff that needs to be done that we currently own versus growing government. That's the job. You're gonna have to make a decision as to, do we wanna fix what we've got or grow more? And then still have to fix what we've got.
Right, or make sure we're meeting the other needs of our residents. I mean, road paving is important, I don't mean to take any of that away, but we do a lot more than just provide roads for people to
Well, I mean,
drive
what's
on.
gonna happen is, I think John alluded to it before, down the road a year or two, you're gonna have to take in another bond for $1.5 million to do roads.
Yep.
Somewhere you gotta, I mean, you've got potentially
Well, and we're gonna
sewer.
be talking about whether we add more roads to our road budget, developers who
and
want us to add roads into our
And I
town.
asked Jonathan,
I mean, presumably though, that one road that we're adding is gonna change tax values enough, right? I mean, if you live on a private road versus if you live on a public road,
If someone lives on a private road, I feel like it doesn't, but I know what you're saying.
But
Yeah.
I said to Jonathan earlier, I said, well, how much does it cost? What condition is the road in?
Yeah.
And all those things that would be good to know before you
Yeah, no, we
You know.
need to know all that before we decide we're going to take it on as a town
I mean,
liability.
It may not currently be paved to town standards, thickness. And if it
That's-
isn't, well, sorry.
That's sort of classic, right?
Well, I mean.
For the
in your-
developer
in
to
your
save a lot of
neighborhood,
money
Dick-
and,
In his neighborhood, Dick tried to get us to take on roads for years.
Yep.
But it hadn't been developed out enough. And I think it is now, so I'm surprised nobody's ever come back. You know,
I don't know anything.
yeah.
I'm not saying anything.
Valley Road.
I'm away from that one.
Keep the valley.
well, there are books written about how that bankrupts towns, is trying to take on everybody's roads. As we can see from these numbers, it's mind-boggling.
So one thing that and I know everyone wants to go, it's 9 and not everyone wants to leave, but,
I'm fine.
one thing, so when we started this process, I talked about trying to see what departments we were sort of taking off the table and what departments are still on the table, right? And it's a hard thing to do that.
What do you mean by taking off the table?
Not-
What I
Well,
mean
like
is,
animal control, are we
for
gonna?
example, right, are we talking about animal control or not? Because what I wanna be able to do is, whether it's the select board meeting on the 1st, or your meeting tomorrow, I wanna make our department heads available to answer questions, to help, give you positive or negative. And so, obviously I'm here, so all of the general government, Megan's gonna be here, so there's finance, but are there other, from the budget committee's perspective, Public Works is definitely on that list, that we
I mean,
sort of
should-
identified that night one.
Shouldn't we have already heard from everybody enough to make a decision based on,
I hope so, yeah, I just wanna make sure that, if there's questions asked, that it's sort of, you can get to the answers you need, so that, because really tomorrow's the last night for the budget committee to do their work, and then I don't wanna have a bunch of department heads sitting around if they're not helpful for what you need, and to finish your work on the budget, so I'm sort of trying to get a list. So, for example, do we need, does either group need general assistance there? Okay, how about police?
so I don't think I asked that question
Yep.
for general assistance, but
Yep.
it used to be that the general assistance person had an assistant as
No longer.
it used, so there's no backup. We
No.
hired the $34,000 person.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, no, we don't have a backup right now for that, and we need to talk about that, but,
Well, I mean, it used to be the clerk and
Right.
your assistant.
yes, yep, absolutely.
The clerk used to be the primary and the assistant
Yep.
was the backup.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. Do we need Jason here tomorrow? Do you want Jason here tomorrow? I mean, and the reason why, and I'm not saying this because I want him to combat what you're gonna say, but
Well, but what you're really asking is the fire department budget up for further discussion and is EMS,
Right.
right? Not should Jason be here or not, but,
right, that's
because
right.
Jason will be here if those are going to be the,
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I would expect him to be there on the 1st, regardless. Is there expectation to be further discussion about EMS tomorrow?
I mean, I can tell you for me that I'm still pondering
Yeah,
things with all of them because I'm going back to the growing things versus taking care of
Yep.
things.
yep,
So maybe I will
yeah.
say, hey.
And
oh,
I
by
don't
the
wanna,
way.
I'm not asking for your vote now or
No,
what you
no, I'm
recommend.
just-
I
I'm just
wanna be
saying,
fair
I-
about
I'm-
that, about,
Things to be discussed.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
so, okay, so
But I
that's
mean,
good.
whether they hear or not, doesn't make any difference to me because
Yeah.
I'll say what I'm gonna say.
I know you will, yeah, absolutely.
They might have some info.
Harbor? Is there further conversation on the harbor needed?
I tried to get them more money.
I was here, yeah, I remember, yeah. Public Works, yes,
so is that a no on harbor?
that's what I heard,
Okay. Which means no discussion about the harbor
no
tomorrow
discussion
night.
about the harbor, right?
I don't know if it's necessarily
Well-
no discussion, it's just that we don't have any questions for her.
Yeah, okay,
Just because.
We don't need anything answered.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just be evaluated.
But you may still go over the harbor
We're still
budget
gonna
and
discuss.
make
We may still
decisions.
make recommendations.
Yeah, that's,
But
I just
that-
want to
and-
distinguish
But we
that.
don't-
Just-
And that's what I said to Jonathan, I think we've heard everything we need to hear from
Yeah.
every department head that's been here, and our own conversations to come up with some sort of recommendation. And whether we make a recommendation, they try to talk us out of it because they need it or not, is immaterial, because that's gonna be what we recommend.
I
You
mean,
know,
I
and
think,
then-
I personally think having the department heads here again
Yeah,
is, if anything, gonna just extend the meeting beyond what it needs to be, because
sure.
we as a budget committee have still not even met as a committee to talk amongst ourselves,
Yeah.
not amongst ourselves, but
No, I know what
talk
you mean. Yeah.
between each other,
Sure.
to even come up with a recommendation or an idea. I mean, I could have no idea how Mark feels about some of the numbers
Yeah.
in some of these, or what Janet thinks about this vehicle, or whatever.
And again, I'm not trying to limit your rights or wants to talk about it. I'm trying to give as much support for your deliberations to not, make a good decision, make a bad decision, at least the department heads in the room. So that's what I'm trying to get,
Oh,
is
yeah.
give you as much information. You may disagree, you may agree, like you said, you may wanna give more, but the best way possible. So, I don't have to go through these if you don't want, and I'll stop.
I mean, I
now,
would,
but-
again, my 2 cents,
Yeah.
because the department heads, our recommendations are not the change to the budget, obviously. So, it's
I mean,
just
you're-
taking us
But-
from what we've got to a point here to what they can use as more info, and they
Yeah.
also meet with the department heads again and say, hey, the budget committee said, you're crazy.
Right. I would just say
What
they
would you
listen,
say?
but those department heads listen to what you say, whether it gets included in the budget or not. They care a great deal about that
Oh, sure.
vote
Yeah.
and
Oh,
your
yeah.
efforts and
I mean, that's their job, and it shows, of course, because
Right.
they include themselves in the process.
I just don't, yeah, right. They value what your insight or input is, and they, like I said, they may agree with it, may disagree with it, but
And I
it's
think
important. to
if
them.
there's any questions, I mean, you developed the budget with them, we've already
Yeah.
heard from them. So anything that
Yeah.
we have questions of,
Yeah.
you can, I'm sure, answer.
Probably, yeah.
So, I
Probably.
mean, I don't necessarily see a need for them to be here.
All right. Message received.
How's Jeff feel about it? He's been quiet as a budget committee member up there.
He's streaming a movie, I think.
Good Star Wars going back there.
I guess.
That's why they headphones.
So I guess turning over to the four of you, I'm going to probably have a number of department heads here on Monday night. Majority maybe, I don't know. And it may be the same ones I talked to about whether they wanna come tomorrow or not. But I want to make sure if there's changes that they can answer your questions and make sure the money's from whatever value you have and what their input is on that they're, at least, it's going to the best place possible. So, okay.
I think that's helpful.
I'll
may-
read it best I can.
There may be some things I'm not
Right,
clear
there
about.
might be some nuances
Sure.
we
And I'd
missed,
like,
and
so they can,
And that, we're here, whatever the group is, staff is here to support that, and get us all through this thing so we can put a warrant together and let everybody vote on it, so.
So will you have those numbers about the road
Tomorrow.
tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did we find out about the Opera House?
We're not selling it.
Yet.
I thought we skipped it at one point in time because we were gonna come back because some report was going to be here that tells us what we
No,
were
that's what
going
we're
to
gonna
need to it.
budget for, is a report to know
Yeah.
what we
budget to
got.
do a report.
So
Right.
next year is an evaluation of the Opera House,
So there's nothing in the budget for the Opera House this year,
to do this report.
just to do the report?
Well, and I mean, there's, we've gotta,
Operate.
Yeah, to
we've gotta
operate
operate
as
it.
desired.
Yeah,
And-
right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing when you go back to the things that we potentially could be adding. I mean, if they come back and said it's gonna be $750,000, then
Yep.
that's next year, or the next 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Could be the next 12 years, and by the time it's done, it will rot out, and you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about it.
So hopefully we can find a Friends of the Rockport Opera.
Yeah, I said it.
So, all right, I guess that's, thank you, that sort of helps. I'll get people together as needed.
I think
So-
animal control's still okay.
Yeah.
5:45.
And then tomorrow there'll be, Greg Haney and Benny Hilt will be here to talk about their application. The budget committee will vote on its recommendation of that, because it's a self-contained issue on the warrant.
What,
Road.
So, yep, the road.
Oh,
And
that's the
then
road
Any road that goes from
Yep.
private to public, you get to vote on.
And will they have the data and all that on that road? I guess it's not our decision.
No, we'd rather have our own people give us the data rather than the guy that wants us to take it on.
Yeah,
good.
so we've got that, and then that would, that would come forward to the 8th, the meeting on the 8th, to be decided in terms of what goes on the warrant on the 8th. And then we have the 1st, which will be the budget meeting, and then that's when you'll.
tomorrow?
Meetings here, yep, same bat time, same bat channel.
But is tomorrow night's primarily the budget committee doing it, and we're just watching?
They're running the show, and yeah, so
Okay.
they'll be running the meeting and managing
Who's
Meg-
running Benny and Greg's?
Mr. Chair, you.
I thought the board gets their information so that they can approve it to be put onto the warrant later on.
So they,
Yeah, I thought the board was on there first on that process that you sent us.
they have to approve to put it on the warrant, but because tomorrow's potentially the last time you may meet, you need to vote on that before they'll set their warrant. So that's sort of what happened last time. The reason why the recommendation wasn't on is because whatever your last vote is before they set the budget is what your recommendation is. That's what the charter says. And so the reason why it didn't have that recommendation is because once they finalize their budget, it's done. There's no other, and that's what happened last year.
So, just to help clarify, our job is not to tell you that we recommend you eliminate $50,000 from personnel. Ours is just to say, we recommend whatever the vote is to eliminate 50,000 from highway. And then you find the 50, or,
I don't think, I mean, I guess,
I mean, we have that ability to say either
no, but
we
you've
agree
been
with it or
sitting
we
in on
don't.
this, so where do you think, I mean, you know all the details, so where do you think it should come? I don't,
Well, we're
it's
gonna.
not helpful to
we're-
tell us to just take 50,000 out and then we'll just.
Well, you just
Well,
gotta
but
take
don't you
what
want to
that-
be a partner at the table? You've
Well, we have
sat
been.
through this, and so you know about the data sond, and maybe you think that's something we should get or not get, or whether we get another vehicle at the time. I mean, it's that level of
But-
detail is the
but we
only way
can't-
we can
we can't-
incorporate.
We can't dictate what you cut out of it. That's up to you guys. We can
Right,
just
but
say.
we want to listen to your recommendations, and if they're specific, then we can do something with it.
Well,
But if
we
you
can't-
just say, cut $1 million
I
from the budget.
I don't think we can be that specific, because it's like when one of our fan club goes down to, when we had the town meetings down there, they can go up before the board and say, I move we eliminate 50,000 from the police department. You can't say what you want eliminated, because it goes back to you guys and the manager to come up with that, if it passes. So I guess.
Well, then this was sort of a waste of, I
It's
guess I don't
never a
understand.
waste of time.
But I
I
mean,
think
there's
it
so
just-
many good, interesting things that people were saying about whether they would
Yeah.
add or cut, that we would want the benefit of your thoughts on that.
Well, and
So that
I've
we can actually
already-
make a difference.
And I've already started by saying, hey, we've got $851,000 worth of stuff we can't do that's recommended by your department head, but yet we're growing government in other areas. So, yes, those things we're growing will help, but we also need these other things that we can't afford. And once you start growing government with personnel and other things, they're always gonna be there. So this other stuff you can't afford now is still gonna be there next year, and you can't afford it. And then we'll take out a bond for $1.5 million to do the stuff we can't afford.
So maybe, let me try to, usually with the way the format this takes, and I think maybe this helps to, so there's two parts of this, right? Usually there's the recommendation that gets printed on the warrant, right? And that's what everyone sees. Then there's the second part, and that's the part that really nobody sees except for the board, which is a letter that's drafted, and it's really, Megan, but it's bullet points of what occurred in your meeting that gets sent to the board. And so the chairs in the past would say, okay, here's the letter, whether it was Jeff Sharland or, whoever. And they would say, this is what our recommendations are. Now, your job, to me, the budget committee's job is twofold. Budget committee's job is to to be the voice of the taxpayer and be on the ballot. But I think there's a second piece of the job, which is how can you get this board to agree with what you say and what you think as a group? The bulk of you, right? How do you get 5, 6, whatever it is, to say, geez, this is what we think you should do this. Because honestly, just saying, no, we don't like it isn't gonna get far. But can you say, hey, we think we should do this, we should spend $8,000, or we should spend, 5, whatever it is. Convince them otherwise, because you're right, they're gonna put the budget together, and if you can convince them, like it happened with the tax map thing, I know it's low-hanging fruit, but that's where the process worked, right? You guys said, hey, you missed this one, this was an easy one. They said, yeah, that's a great idea. Problem solved. So I think there's a way to sort of meet both needs. It doesn't mean they will always agree with what the budget committee said or vice versa, but I think that's something that could help a little bit in trying to bring this along. Like I said, we've been through this for 4 nights now of having this conversation. And the more I think, I think there's been vastly more agreement in what we've seen than not. What I hear, the conversation I hear, not everything, of course, but there are areas of disagreement, and if there's 5 people who agree to that, there's a motion, a second, and a vote on a given topic, I think the board wants to hear that, wants to consider it, and give it its day.
Yeah,
That's what I'm hearing.
absolutely.
So I think that, and I think you can be specific, Mark. I think you can offer that. Will they agree? Maybe not, but maybe they'll take your idea and go in a different direction with it, and it's still the same level cut. Or, I think there's a desire of unanimity here.
I would find having as much information to justify or deny or whatever helpful to me to understand.
Yeah. I mean, you guys could certainly be here too, and that, that's part of that, but
You guys have a lot more history and all that than obviously I do.
Yeah.
And knowing where your thought processes were would be very helpful to me. Maybe not for office paper clips and stuff like that, but on a larger scale.
gotta give it the paper clips, yeah.
And I think, and pardon me, I was gone for 2 minutes there, but I think that Mark was alluding to the process of what would happen in a live town
Right.
meeting, where it was simply, hack.
And I wasn't sure whether we got down to saying, I don't want the paper clips. Or whether we just say, I don't want you to spend the $10, and then you find out where that is, and it's the paper clips. I don't know to what detail we can actually say, because it's up to these guys.
Right, but
And
it
if we-
sounds like the more detailed, the better.
No, true, I mean,
Yeah,
if-
To me, it's more helpful because I think we've had a discussion at that level, so it'd be great to
Right,
sort of
so like
see what.
Like on conservation. Yeah, we do want the data on, we want it now, instead of the 5,000 a year.
You think we could get a?
Add the 20 this year as opposed to
A real
5.
quote?
If you've got that, just that little
'Cause I
notation
looked
with it.
online, they don't seem to
That
be
would help.
20,000.
Not what I saw either.
I certainly wouldn't want to hear.
Maybe we'll just
"Oh,
buy
no,
the
no,
one."
Don't do the EMS, do the roads
eBay.
instead.
And I don't think that would happen, but I think there's other areas that you guys can, it's like the $77,000 for salt. I mean, you still have quite a bit of money in there. And one of those $6,400 streets up at Maple could get done by not funding the salt as much as what you think you're gonna. So being creative enough to find the little things that will help chew away at the $851,000. It isn't going away. And asphalt's probably not gonna be any cheaper next year. And the employees and other things that you're growing the infrastructure, they're not gonna be any cheaper.
So, okay, so that brings up the point. I mean, we discussed that the other night about the salt. We've got an excess in salt because we didn't need it. And so how does that work? It's not that you necessarily are gonna cut anything from the Public Works budget, but allocate it elsewhere. How does?
Well, you could cut it. You could cut because you're gonna order it from this year's budget. Of course, we just used a lot this weekend, by the way.
Of course.
Like a lot more than probably we would have thought, but, you know, there's a school of thought where you could have cut it in this year's, in the proposed budget, because you're gonna buy it in this year's budget because you didn't use as much.
I mean,
You know, and I assume that's probably where you were going,
And
right?
even if you cut it 15,000,
Yeah.
you have a reserve, I don't know what that is, but if you found yourself in need of something at the end of
Created a reserve for that in the previous year.
No, that's right.
But with the thinking of some of that money that's in the line item for the salt could go towards
Right.
paving.
Right.
It's just being creative,
Yeah.
knowing that you don't need all of that because you still have some, and you have a reserve should you go over. I mean, if you cut it back 50, I'm just picking numbers.
Right.
I don't know, you know. And we always seem to budget the same amount every year. And some years we use more, some years we don't. And I don't think this is a year where we used as much,
Yeah.
which should leave us with a little bit of a surplus with stock on hand plus,
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever.
And this is, I don't wanna admonish us, but like, this is why, like, if we go through it when we're in the middle of it, it's so much easier to do the changes. So now we're gonna have to, what did we say and where was it gonna go? And this is the hard part about that, because there's so many different lines and so many different conversations we have over 3 nights. It's hard to sort
Well,
of
and-
get back on the horse
And-
again
and
tomorrow
I'll-
night, you know,
to
and start
Denise-
over.
To Denise's point, I mean, there was a lot of give and take. I mean, I lobbied for the conservation.
Right.
Because they need it. They need a pat on the back. They do good work.
They do.
And then when you look at the $1.8 million budget that the highway has, what exactly did we do? Not much. And that's got to be a place where, you know, I mean,
No, that
$1.8
one,
million.
I specifically thought we should re-examine, I mean, that one.
Yeah, I mean,
Because we gotta do something, and
I mean, yes, stuff needs to be done, but, you know, we weren't gonna help the conservation out until we had the conversation, and then you guys, you know, may put it back in, don't know. But we're talking about an $18,000 budget, and we're scrutinizing over giving them $20,000 to buy a piece of equipment that they do good work with. But we can't seem to find anything in the $1.8 million budget that we can,
well, I have a
Massage
question
away.
about there's an additional employee there. You know,
I-
we moved Glenn over
And
from
that's-
DPW into Buildings and Grounds, which makes a lot of sense, but then do we still?
and that's growing, that's what I say, growing.
Well, that's why
you know.
I mean, that's a question I have about the
I mean,
DPW budget.
some of that
is,
stuff
do
I
we
don't
need that?
disagree that is needed, but you've got a lot of stuff coming up in the next year or two.
We do as a town, yeah.
Yep, and hard choices. Don't envy it, having
No,
been there.
and ideas like the salt, or, you know, it's not a lot of money, but it
Well,
adds
I mean,
up.
some of it too, I think, what also helps kind of to go with Mark's point is, if you, instead of when we get to a department and say, you know, let's cut this line item, let's cut this line item, let's add to this line item, if you were to get with a department head and say, basically, instead of let's cut this line item, we said, if we were gonna take 25,000 from your budget, where would you take it from? It's
Right.
gonna put
It might be
pressure on
different.
them to start to come up with
I mean-
what means the least amount to them, you know?
They'd
I
be
mean-
prioritizing a lot.
So,
more
and
than real.
that is one of the ways you tend to inherently get
Having,
creative thinking,
well,
because,
having been a department head and presented budgets, I know that there's room for negotiation. And I, you know, having been a department head and then being a board member and then being on the budget committee, there's a lot of stuff that I've experienced that tells me that there's room.
Well,
Anyway, that's your.
that's what tomorrow night's for.
That's what you guys are.
So tomorrow night, the six of you, wait, six?
If Helen, if Helen is here.
Let's assume Helen's there.
I haven't gotten a message back from her,
So
so.
the six of you will meet, you'll talk about the road conversation first, then go through the budget, make recommendations. Second, motion second, 5 in favor, makes it pass. And then, I don't know if you wanna, certainly we can talk about process and how, part by department or whatever. And then that would turn into a letter with recommendations, and then something that will become the recommendations that would go on the warrant article. And then the board goes to work on the first, makes the changes they wanna make to the budget, having heard those recommendations,
Right, listens to the budget committees.
we turn that into a warrant, a draft warrant, with all of those items that we talked about from the March meeting. And then on the 8th, you'll go through and do your recommendations, and you'll figure out which articles you're gonna have, and
So
sign a warrant, and away we go.
we don't necessarily have to make a recommendation. We can just vote whatever way we vote, right?
Your job, the only job you have is
well,
to make recommendations on the warrant,
No,
so.
well, that's what I'm saying, is when you go department by department.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And we vote on highway.
Yeah.
We don't have to say we'd like to cut $17,000. We can just vote it 3-2, 5-0, or whatever. We don't have to do any.
Vote what?
Well, you don't have
on the,
it's not a vote if you don't have,
If you don't have a recommendation.
you gotta have,
That's
yeah.
just like an up or down vote on that department budget, is that what you're saying?
I mean, there's minutes.
Yeah,
Is that
Without
what you
giving,
mean?
without giving an actual dollar amount.
For us to know? That would be, my instinct is I wouldn't know what you wanted to do
We're
then.
public.
Yeah,
No, 9 o'clock.
I mean,
I don't
think-
understand.
yeah,
I guess
I
I don't
think-
understand.
I think that,
I'll probably know more tomorrow after watching.
I think you'd have to leave, I mean, my advice, you can do, whatever, but my advice is, one, you need 5 votes, and to make your recommendations. If you don't get enough, let's say it's 4-2, I mean, that's a vote, but it would fail, right? And it wouldn't be on the warrant, but it'd be part of your minutes. Is that what you mean? I mean, it's part of the record, but it's not, it wouldn't be a recommendation.
So you have to actually have a dollar value attributed to it.
Yeah, because that's what they have to, that's sort of the recommendation for the taxpayers on the warrant. That's sort of the bottom line, I guess, of the whole thing. Does that make sense?
So each line would be, each department would be a recommendation.
No, so if they don't go,
Only if there's a change,
only if there's a
Right.
change, so
or something they want to adjust.
it's just, if there's only 2, it's Public Works and
So if there's,
Insurance, those are the,
if there's no recommendation through all the department heads, and then we get down to the grand total at the bottom, then we make a recommendation saying 200,000. I'm not saying plus or minus.
for the whole.
That number would be, show our vote and the number that we're saying either ought to be up or down.
I'm trying to think, so, let's talk about a specific, just because it's easier for me to
Well,
understand.
let's talk about the total budget, the end line.
Okay, so the total budget of whatever that number is, you could say.
We take a vote on that.
Yep, and you could say, Right, but what's the action that you're?
Well,
you're
we're
gonna
just
say-
saying it ought to be $200,000 plus or minus.
Okay.
So we're just saying that.
That's
and
what
vote-
you think the overall budget should be
and
for the whole
voting on-
budget? is
Voting on that
200,000.
number. So
Okay.
even if we don't do anything on the other little ones,
Okay,
at the end number,
yeah,
we still take a vote based on whatever number we put out there, either to increase it or decrease it.
for the whole budget of every department, the
Right.
whole municipal budget?
Right.
The-
I mean,
the only-
we take a vote on the total budget.
You don't, you won't though. I mean,
We can't, if you do
you
that.
could, I suppose, you could,
Unless
actually.
we end up saying we make a motion, unless a motion is made to
Yeah.
say, a blanket motion to say, the
Yeah.
budget should be, instead of whatever
Yes.
the net $1 million budget is,
Yes,
then we make a motion that the net budget should be
right,
1.5 instead of 1.9.
right, right.
Right, except then,
Whatever.
The problem is then, what do the
we
taxpayers do with that, the voters?
well, and what is the
Right.
select board
I mean,
supposed to do
Well,
with
that's
that?
the other thing,
Because
yeah.
at that point, we're gonna be like, well,
That's
thank you.
all
Yeah,
I'm
in
asking.
the perfect world, we also wish that, but
All
we
I'm
have this
asking, what
budget.
are our parameters? Do we have, if we don't put a number to any of the ones prior to the bottom line number,
Mm-hmm.
we're still entitled to take a vote on that.
I
Is it
suppose,
helpful, though?
I'm just
That's what
asking,
I'm-
I'm
Yeah, I mean,
asking.
what-
It
if what
you want
doesn't
to
seem like anybody
accomplish
knows,
is-
that's why I'm asking the
Well,
question.
I would
I don't know how
say
to charter with them.
instinctively, no, that's not good.
I mean, I think the question
But I've never been
the
through this
committee,
before.
the budget committee should ask itself is what can they offer for information on the warrant that helps them support what they've seen in the budget process, right? Like, if, and tangibly, what should a taxpayer be able to see from that to say, it's a good budget, it's a bad budget? You know, I think, to me, as someone who's in the process, I look at it and say those specifics matter. Because you can say, one, you were engaged in
it's a
all those
2023,
departments. I like this, I don't like this. And being able to figure out what those are, I think that matters. If you
Critical.
don't, if you sort of go bottom line, I feel like it maybe doesn't help the taxpayers understand
What are,
the detail to which you've done the work.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would say is, you guys have done a way better job than, well, it's, you know, you guys have been here and you've been through all.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
here's my back patted.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
that,
but that's.
No, I'm
true.
good.
That's
We're-
true,
we'll-
yeah.
I've learned more now that that's,
I think we're figuring it out, honestly. I do. I think we are, that's the thing, is how do we get the most out of, and maybe it gets more people to run for it, but like, how do we get the process you guys have been through? I mean, Clay's made a lot of good points, you've made a lot of good points, Zach's made a lot of good points about, like, what is it that we're talking about? I'll leave you out, Janet, and Jeff. But the problem is like, how do we get your role as the watch guard for the citizens, the taxpayers? How do we put that on a ballot in a way that helps them understand, this is the places we think we can do better in these budgets, and tee them up to fix it? Because if you tee them up to fix it, or not, then the taxpayers can understand sort of like what the balance is. It's not just, oh, it's all this or it's all that, it's, we think there should be a, what is it called, a data-thon?
yeah.
There should be, there shouldn't be. Well, why did you say no? We said no because it costs too much, or we can find it on eBay for $5,000, or whatever it is, like, that's the type of conversation I think we should be having when we do the public hearing about those differences and why it goes the way it goes, because that was what Eric really wanted when we sort of tried to remake the timing of this, so we get back to that conversation like we used to have on the floor about why, where is it good, where is it bad, you know, and people need to know about the issues we have with infrastructure. They're not gonna know that. Now, you may ultimately say, we gotta do the other things and infrastructure, or we gotta pick, but that's the decision I think the taxpayers have to make and the voters have to make. And hopefully, I think if you guys can tee that up the right way, they can buy into what they want to buy into that, and then the differences are where the voters are.
I mean, I'm probably gonna vote for everything.
Yeah, okay.
But I think I've made my point is that there's a lot of stuff that we have hanging out there that according to the highway foreman, for instance, is in dire need of being fixed, but we can't afford it.
Yep.
So,
So we gotta figure out how to deal with that.
right?
Very important to have that stated, I think,
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, there's stuff that we don't know about yet. I mean,
Yeah.
across the street,
Right. Big time.
that's Eric's place.
So does everyone sort of understand, I mean, is there any questions about process? And I felt like last year we should have had this conversation before we went down that road, and then of course we learned a whole lot more once we happened. But I wanna make sure, you know, before we go into tomorrow night and next week, you know, we're in a good path and jumping off point. That work?
Thank you for all your time.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff.
Wow.
What, did somebody close the meeting?
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Are we done?
Okay, the meeting's now adjourned.
They just
Okay, Jeff, we're done.